Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this special evening of Vestiges After Dark. As most of you know, we attempted to do a live show on March 28th about this topic regarding cults. And we got through maybe the first 20, 30 minutes of the show, and it cut out. And the internet dropped on us. We lost our signal, and we made a second attempt, which lasted for about an hour and a half, and we got through half the show, and then it dropped out again. So we had given up at that point, but I did save the recording from March 28th, which you are about to watch this evening. If you missed it, or if you were having technical issues as well, this is your opportunity to refresh your memory. But it cut me off at a very critical point about a very sensitive subject that needed far more clarification than I was able to give it. And because of that, I did not want to wait for another month or so before we had an opportunity to tackle this subject again. So because of Holy Week next week and all of the demands on my time with the church schedule, tonight was literally the only night I could re-air this show after the internet was fixed, which it now is. I've tested it. It's working perfectly fine. And it was the most simple, most asinine problem you can possibly imagine. The person who installed, the technician, I should say, who installed the internet at this house when we moved into it, plugged the gateway into a surge protector. And this particular type of gateway takes different voltages from the power system as it needs to maintain signal cohesion. When it's plugged into a surge protector, it prevents the gateway from being able to do that. And that's why we were having constant drops in signal. That should not happen anymore. If it does, then there's clearly another problem, but I've been testing it all day today, and there were no issues. It's been flawless. So I hope that this is finally the issue. I hope it was that simple. And man, could that have been so much easier if we had had a technician that knew what he was doing when he came out here in the first place. I mean, you would think that that would be a simple thing to know if you are working in the industry. Do not plug the gateways into surge protectors. Anyway, it's fixed now. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to re-air the part that we do have from March 28th. And then when it cuts out at that critical point, I'm going to finish my thought, and then we're going to get into the subject of cults live. Okay? So sit back, grab yourself a glass of wine, and enjoy the show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this March 28th, 2023. Okay, tonight we are talking about cults. And if you were listening live, you know that this is the second time we've tried to start this show. It's because I'm coming to you from the deep woods of Western Georgia that this is a problem, okay? Because we can't get fiber out here unless we spend $30,000 to get the wire put out to this location. I guess that's another reason for you to support the show. Otherwise, we might have to go back to an audio-only version of this. But tonight we've got a really interesting show if the internet will cooperate and let us get through it. It's going to be dark and disturbing and certainly going to offend. So if you're easily offended, I'd say turn off now. Otherwise, we'll see you in just a moment. Everybody again, at least for those of you who are with us since the beginning. I know if you're listening to this on demand, that's not going to make much sense because I actually deleted the other attempt at this. Essentially what's happening is we're having basically drops in the internet. It cuts out, and YouTube has no tolerance for it. Spreaker does just fine. Spreaker will work through it, but YouTube will just, if it doesn't get a feed for an extended period of time, it automatically shuts you off whether you want it to or not, which is very unfortunate. Spreaker doesn't do that. So that's what I was trying to say, is that if we go back to an audio-only version of this show, we'd have consistency from week to week. The downside to that is that you'd no longer be able to have the visual aspects, which I know most of you appreciate, because that's why we started doing it in the first place. But in order to be able to get the kind of internet that we need to be able to do that correctly without these kinds of problems, we would need either to pay Comcast $30,000 to put the fiber optic line in, because they won't do it. They want me to pay for it, and the church can't afford that. And I don't think that I should personally have to pay for it, because this is a church funded thing, and I've already put enough of my own money into this over the years. I'm tapped out as far as supporting the job that I spend time and a half at. You know, I mean, a job that should be paying me a proper salary, I end up giving more money to than I get back. So that in itself is a problematic thing, and it gets me really offended when people start telling me that I make too much money. It's like, yeah, because I work my ass off in other ways to do this job. But anyway, that's besides the point. The other issue is that we could also get the front part of the property rezoned to commercial, in which case Comcast will then put the wire in for free. Yeah, that's the way it is. Anyway, we might have to go that route. I've got about 19 acres here, and the front 10 acres I could get rezoned commercial, which might make the situation go away. But that could take some time. It certainly won't get us through this season. So hopefully we can get through the rest of the season without any more issue. To get us through, however, all of these internet problems, we have liturgical libations. What are we drinking here tonight?
We have Oban.
Oban 14, that's right.
14-year Western Highland.
Yeah, and you're probably
Scotch.
on your third one now, because, I mean, we're already...
I am on 1.5, sir.
There you Anyway, this is a very nice Scotch. It has a very nice ocean quality to it. I need to talk tonight.
You need one.
No, okay. Not if you want me to talk about cults tonight.
I'll drink yours.
Oh, thank you. But no, we basically this is a wonderful Scotch from the Highlands. No, actually Western Highlands, right?
Western Highlands.
Yeah, it's got a very sea breeze kind of flavor, slightly peated, just a hint of peat. It's not like the Isla Scotches.
Yeah, I do not care for peats at all. This has a nice, you can tell there's a sea kind of taste
sea quality
to it. It's mild. It's mild.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent with a nice, strong cigar.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very nice with a cigar. As I said on the previous attempt for this show, I don't care for peated scotches with cigars. I think it drowns out the flavors. So I always go to Highland or Speyside scotches with cigars. Even Lowland is not too bad with a scotch.
I love a good Speyside or my Highland Dalmore. I love to.
Yeah,
that was a good.
Those are good. Yeah, Dalmore cigar malt's wonderful,
Yes.
and all that. Okay, so let's try this again. Joining us for this show, I know you've been missing him, is Father Chris. He's still traveling, but he's able to join us, and he is currently at a hotel at 1:00 in the morning. Poor guy's going to be up all night
hours.
long.
God bless you.
Yeah, and this didn't help. This little thing, we're getting started practically an hour late now. But anyway, he's got to be a little bit quiet. So if he's not his normal, loud and aggressive self, you know why. How you doing tonight,
being
Father?
Considerate.
Yeah, he's being very considerate.
Yeah, I'm pretty well. I'm coming to you from Dublin, although the picture in the background is from Athlone, which is halfway between Dublin and Galway. We went out to Galway last weekend. So I took this picture of the River Shannon and thought, well, let's put that on the background rather than just a blank hotel room wall behind me. So, but no, we're going pretty well. We got to England last week, and then spent the first week in Ireland. We've got another week to go here before we go back to England and Scotland and Wales. So it's a big trip.
Do they have thin walls in Dublin? Is that what's going on?
His wife's probably
Well, it could be that. Yeah.
Or is your wife with you? Is she
really know.
sleeping? Is she sleeping on the other side?
Yeah.
Let's not wake the wife.
Yeah, let's not wake your wife up. Oh, poor thing. Okay. And we got also Brandon Milam here tonight to bring us questions from the ether. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
Doing very good.
Are you ready for attempt 2 here? Because we just got started on this part where we're now caught up where we were supposed to be before it got cut off. So I guess let's just jump right in here. What's our first question from the ether?
So I'm going to ask this question very gently, very slowly.
Yeah, don't knock us off again. I think maybe you put a little too much energy out there. We'll try to take care.
Might have.
That might have been it.
This question comes from Janet.
Okay.
And is in regards to the Archeo deck we used a couple weeks ago. When you use the Archeo deck, do you need to charge it before you use it?
Okay, the Archeo deck. Now, for those of you who are a student of mine, and if you've actually been a student of the tarot, you know that it is a typical practice to charge the deck with the 4 elements of the 4 elements of the occult world, which is, of course, water, fire, earth, and air. And so you will imprint those elements into it. Kind of a pagan practice. I think it would scare a lot of Christians off. But this is what you do, okay? And what it does is it connects the tarot to the elemental properties that they represent. Because if you've studied the tarot, you know that the tarot contains the 4 elements with the 5th primary element of ether, and that's represented in the major arcana. The minor arcana are made up of the suit of wands, which is fire, the suit of swords, which is air, the suit of discs, which is earth, and the suit of cups, which is water. Okay. Now, the Archeo deck is a supplemental deck. It's a non-tarot oracle, and these do not have these kinds of occult elemental affiliations. So it is not necessary to charge it in the same way because you're not trying to create an archetypal vibrational connection to those elements. And honestly, technically speaking, if you've got a relationship with the tarot, you don't really need to charge the deck at all. This is done mostly for your benefit. It's so that you can more tangibly connect to these ethereal properties. But if you know what you're doing, you don't really need to even do those, although I find that it's still helpful to do so because it's good to externalize these practices in the same way that, sometimes it's better to pray out loud than it is to just pray in your head. I mean, most of us, I think, when we're praying to God, even if we're, alone, we tend to sometimes verbalize our prayers, even though we don't need to. It's not like God needs you to speak, but it's a way of externalizing and making tangible the experience of it, which is why oratio.
It used to be required as well. I mean, I think even when I was first sort of learning these ways, my priest would say, well, you have to at least mouth the words. Like they must fall from your lips.
They must fall from your lips. And I mean, there's something to be said for that, because what it is it's making something tangible. It's the same principle on confession. It's like, can you go to God directly with your sins? Well, yeah, of course you can. But the sacrament requires you to actually externalize it. And there's a reason for that externalization. You're forcing yourself to experience it and make it accessible in a different way than when it just stays all up there in your head. So I think it's important to charge a tarot deck. Now, with these kinds of decks, all that I would recommend doing is basically just a basic lay consecration. And all that is just basically holding the deck and simply saying that you are offering this deck for the purposes that you're using it for, whatever that purpose might be. And for the Archeo deck, it's to explore the archetypes and how they affect people. So that's what you're reserving it for. Consecration is just basically a way of reserving something for a sacred purpose. And that's what you'd be doing with that. But you don't need to go through the whole charging process with these supplementary decks. And once you develop a relationship with the archetypes, you don't need to do it at all. In fact, I've got many decks that are very, very effective, many different oracles that are non-tarot based, and they do a fantastic job without my having to do anything more with them than take them out of the plastic and start using them. But I have a relationship with these archetypes. I've studied them for the last 30 years. So, my relationship is going to be different than yours. So you got to do what you got to do. But no, it's not necessary to do the full charging that I taught my students with tarot.
So I'll go ahead and add a question on top of that question. I've been taught in terms of like crystals and such that you put them out under the moonlight for them to charge.
Yep.
Would the moonlight also charge the cards?
Yeah. Well, that's actually part of the procedure I taught my students with tarot, is that once you've charged the 4 elements into them, the ethereal element is charged through the blue moon, the light of the blue moon. So I tell them, on the night of a blue moon, you will leave the deck exposed to that moonlight for as long as it's possible for the deck to receive that light. And that's what's necessary. Again, it's just a way of connecting it to the forces that the tarot represents. Because remember, the tarot represents the 78 archetypal patterns that are that make up the human experience. So all of the natural world that we understand to be our experience in the natural world is those archetypes. And so the tarot works well when it's aligned and attuned to them. And if there's a way of being able to externalize that from your mind, that your mind can relate back to, it's helpful to go through those little rituals for that purpose. But I mean, that's what magic really is. There's nothing really supernatural about magic. All magic is taking the internal processes and making them external so that they have an external effect. That's all magic is.
Now that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. And there's nothing supernatural about it. I mean, the occult is basically just the secrets of the natural world. That's all the occult is.
So our next question comes from Paula.
Okay.
Is it true that if we buy products and we don't strive to find out how they are made, such as clothing items made by people who weren't receiving rightful wages, are we just as guilty and accountable for the mistreatment they received?
Okay, so what she's referring to is something the church refers to as institutionalized sin. Mm-hmm. Okay. We live in a fallen world. We talked about that a bit last time. Father Chris actually mentioned about how we shouldn't really glorify nature because nature's kind of fallen with us, and it's not going to last, and it's going to be eliminated eventually. God's going to wipe it all out, and it will be restored with something completely new and perfect, and none of this will be here anymore. This is not being this will be perfected, but this cosmos will not. This cosmos will be eliminated, and a new one will replace it. We're the only thing that will be preserved, at least for those who are saved. Thus, salvation is literal saving, being saved like to a hard drive almost. It's like, you can almost say it works in both the contexts or both definitions. So, because we live in a fallen world, that means that even though we try to live the best Christian life we can, even the best Christian life in a fallen person can live in the fallen world is still going to have sin involved. There's just certain things that you can't avoid. We tend to experience these type of unavoidable things. It's like white lies and, things that you do to not hurt people. And it's kind of like having to choose the lesser of two evils. So you choose the better of the two. But even in the end, it's still falsehood. It's still deception, even if it's for the right intent. And this is fallen world induced. Okay, because in the perfect kingdom of heaven, these kinds of deceptions are not necessary. We wouldn't be engaging in any kinds of deceptions with each other in heaven, in the kingdom of heaven, in the perfected world that we were designed to live in. This is all a product of now being in the fallen state. So what that means is, in order to live here, we're also going to participate in activities that are ultimately in some direct or indirect way going to be sinful as well. Okay, so driving your car around to, go to your job and support your family and taking care of the things that you need to take care of, which is all admirable and good and expected, and God wants that of you, still means that your car needs to destroy the environment with its carbon monoxide and global warming and all of the other things that, the technology that we depend on today causes. Okay. Pollution from industrialization, waste from capitalism. Industrialization and capitalism are the best economic policies that the world's ever come up with, but they are wasteful and they are damaging to the environment, whether we like it or not. And that is, unfortunately, a type of sin. And that's something we end up participating in by virtue of just the fact that we're trying to do the best we can in a imperfect world, which means that there's going to always end up at the lowest common denominator being imperfect solutions. You just have to do the less that you can. You do the best that you can, and you try not to add to those problems. That's where personal sin comes in. Personal sin is when you add more sin than's already necessary. There's always going to be sin here by virtue of it being fallen, but you don't really need to murder people. That's not necessary. That just adds more evil to an already evil situation. But, having to drive your car around and pollute the environment, well, that's kind of a necessary evil in our world. We can't avoid that. It would be disastrous. It would cause more problems and even more sin to avoid those things. So it's a sin that we have to live with in order to avoid even greater sins down the road. Because if you starve your family to death, that's a worse sin than polluting the environment with your carbon monoxide from your car. Okay. And don't think that your little energy efficient, electric car saves you, because it doesn't. Where do you think the energy that powers that battery comes from? It comes from coal fire plants. It comes from other, polluting industries. Okay. So it's just making you feel good about an overall. It's perpetual. It's a perpetual problem. That's institutionalized sin. Okay. There's numerous examples. That's just one. So buying clothing. Okay. If you're going to get so scrupulous about where every little thing that you get comes from, you're going to find that everything you're doing could be traced back to some kind of sinful behavior in the end. This is where John Calvin Martin Luther actually came to the conclusion that even when we're doing the best things, we're still sinning. I don't necessarily agree with him completely on that because he took it to an extreme, but inherently he wasn't terribly wrong because he did understand institutionalized sin and how that works, and that even our best of intentions still eventually lead to us having to make less than perfect decisions in order to survive here. So, clothing, I mean, it's going to be, your buying this particular piece of clothing is not going to end the situation or the plight of the people who made those clothes. Okay. It's not going to end it. All right. Because institutionally it's too involved by this point. And in order to use alternatives, you're going to get to a point where something somewhere that you buy is going to be traced back to something that was unjustly created or somebody was exploited for it. It's the nature of the fallen world. Okay. And so count your blessings that you're not on the short end of that stick, and pray for those who are on the short end of that stick. And I wish we lived in a completely perfect equilateral society. We don't. We simply don't. And if we get scrupulous about every little thing and everything we purchase, I mean, you're going to drive yourself insane doing that. That's not going to be helpful either.
The other aspect of that is to say, we might not be on that end of the stick, but probably our great-great-grandparents were.
Yeah, they were.
And that if all of a sudden we just decide, okay, I'm not going to buy anything that's made in Bangladesh, those poor people, and they are poor people who are working in those factories, they're not going to benefit from that.
No,
they just won't have any job.
That's right.
And so now I'm not justifying saying therefore it's a good thing that we, are part of this kind of exploitation, but like you've described, it's a spiral.
It is.
And so, that's why I think if we're fortunate enough to be wealthy and able to make other choices, then we might do that.
And if you can, and if it's something that is possible, then by all means do so. But I would definitely caution someone against becoming scrupulous over these types of things, because if you're going to break it down, I can guarantee you every single thing you purchase has a problematic origin somewhere.
Well, you'll drive yourself nuts trying to. I try to keep just American products, but it is so hard to find them. Like I got Carhartts on, I got Wolverine boots on, I got Oakley socks on.
Americans want top dollar for their labor, so you're gonna pay through the nose.
So you do pay through the nose, but you can't even buy anything on Amazon anymore. If you research anything you buy on Amazon, the country of origin is China.
Yeah.
And so
that's ultimately that's not
insane.
Really your fault.
It is not. It is our government's fault.
That is policy, and that is economics, and it's the way that it works. Whether you like it or not, it's not. Look, it's not fair. I'm the first one to say it's not fair. But the reality is, all the alternatives that we've got are so much worse than capitalism. So be grateful that we at least have a system that's good for a lot of people, and it can hopefully grow into something that's good for even more people. But the alternatives to capitalism are so much worse. So what's the lesser of two evils? Some people are on the short end of the stick where the greater majority are not, or everybody's on the short end of the stick, and then you just have a king that lives well off of your expense, because that's your alternative. A dictator, a socialist regime, those are your alternatives. Okay, so at least capitalism and democracy gives you the opportunity to get yourself out of those situations. It might be rare. I'm not going to say it's easy, and I'm not going to say that just because you live in a free country that now the world's your oyster. Absolutely not. I mean, there's definitely something that's to be said for socioeconomic condition. And if you're born into a low socioeconomic status, you're disadvantaged. Yeah, the cards are stacked against you. But in our system, you still could. It might be just a long shot, but you could still get out of it. You grow up in a socialist or communist regime, good luck. Go to North Korea and see if you can get to the top of the ladder there. See if there's an opportunity for you to grow into something that's at the status of the leader. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
Well, it's why I'm so opposed to anti-competitive laws and lobbyists, getting special treatment from governments to fix the game, because capitalism works best in a free market.
Yeah.
And we're constantly having that market skewed. And so I think the responsibility of those of us in the West is to do something about that, to elect people who will provide us the freest conditions possible for trade.
I knew a guy who, he was from Pakistan. He was a Pakistani. All right. And he lived here. He became an American citizen, made really good money. Okay. Definitely very high salary. And, but he had nothing but nasty things to say about everything American, to the point that you just have to ask yourself after listening to this for a while, you're just like, why the hell are you even here?
You didn't have a problem taking advantage of the opportunity.
And that's what I said to him. Eventually, he and I got into some scuffles, and I was very cordial at first. Eventually, my tolerance level goes down as people continue to push my buttons, and he was pushing them to the point where I was like, okay, I'm done. And I reached the point where I just said, you bitch, and you moan about everything American. The Americans do this, the Americans do that. But it's like, well, you love our fucking money though, don't you?
Sounds like half our own people.
You love those fucking dollars. You don't have a problem with that though, because you're still here, aren't you? Why didn't you go back then? If Pakistan was so much better, go back. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. It's just, you hate it here. So, you don't get to pick and choose. You like our money though. You like that opportunity though. So it's like, even countries that are very critical of our system, the people that are critical of it are still taking advantage of our system, because you know why that is? Because it's still the best one out there.
Oh, and in that country, you wouldn't be able to say that kind of thing about.
No, of course
Pakistan.
not. Of course not.
Not openly.
No, I'd be shut down. Well, YouTube might still shut me down after this. Who knows? I haven't even gotten started tonight. All right, what's our next one, Brandon?
All right, so our last question was apparently asked a couple of months ago, and no one caught it. But here it is. This comes from Jennifer. Her question is, this is hard for me to ask. It is about IVF, which for those who are unfamiliar, I didn't know. IVF is in vitro fertilization.
Yep. Yeah, in vitro. Yep.
Vitro. She said, I was curious that in the Bible, scripture states, I knew you before you were born. Does that also apply to IVF children?
Wow, what a great question.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, of course it does, because that's the whole reason that the church is against abortion and is subsequently not really on board with all of these fertility treatments and things like that. They don't really endorse that, for the reason that it does get into some shaky grounds with what science is doing with embryos and zygotes. Now, let's get practical from a scientific standpoint, first of all. Okay, all things being equal, let's say you are a good Christian Catholic family and you're doing everything right, okay? Regardless of whether or not you're involved in fertility treatments or believe in abortion or against abortion, the reality is, biologically, about 50% or more of zygotes die anyway. Okay, most times when a woman miscarries, she doesn't even know it, because it happens in such those early stages. And that's just because there's something not right with the development of that zygote, and the body has a built-in failsafe to purge it. Okay, now if we take the theology of the church to say that, that life begins at conception, then that zygote is a person. All right, even though 50% of them are dying, which means that 50% of all of those being conceived or more, because I think some stats can go up to 55%, then there's a whole lot of babies dying every single day. And a lot of times the parents don't even know it happened. In fact, you might be one of them. You might have already had a zygote miscarriage and you don't even know it. It's very possible. The church teaches that that's a person, right? That's an individual. But again, because it's a natural miscarry, there's, it's not seen as a culpable thing. You're not aborting it. You're not choosing to get rid of it. Your intention was to have the child. It's still there. So what happens to those zygotes? Well, I mean, in these kinds of situations, the church would be teaching that there's built into the process of salvation some kind of solution for this. And I think if we're going to get theological about it, this is where baptism by desire comes in. Because when you miscarry, if you are, let's say let's go back to my example. If you're a Catholic family and you're doing everything right and you have a natural miscarriage, and you don't even know it. Okay, so it's not like you could have done anything about it. Your intention as a Catholic would have been to get that baby baptized had it come to fruition, which means that your desire was already there and was applied by proxy to that zygote. The concern is more when there are children that are not wanted. And that's where abortion becomes very problematic, because at that point you're talking about children that are being killed, murdered because they are not desired, and there is no intention to take care of them or their salvation. So that's where it becomes problematic. Now, in vitro, fertilization, there's desire there. Now, that's not necessarily, though, the kind of desire that leads to baptism by desire, because you don't know exactly what the intent here is. And if they're Catholics, they shouldn't be messing around with that stuff anyway. So I'm going to say that there is no clear answer on this one. The verdict is completely out, because this is one of those mysteries that we don't really have a definitive answer. But the mind of the church would be that God would, in his great mercy, has some way of working these situations out, and we have to trust in that. That's the best answer that we can give, because we just don't know. That kind of thing wasn't a factor when Scripture was written, so we don't have any theological basis for it, other than the fact that, when you're messing around and playing God, that's never really God's will. So there's something sinful about that kind of science, and you really shouldn't be messing with it to begin with.
I think the moral dilemma comes in when you create more embryos than you're willing to implant.
That is a problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. So I can see a Catholic way forward for. And I think these are offered, but it's expensive. Where typically they create multiple embryos, zygotes, and then put them in and see what happens.
Right.
But an ethical way of doing it would be to create one zygote
and see if it works.
That one zygote, and then see how it would be better. Because then you don't have freezers full of embryos that could be life that are put on ice. Yeah. That's where it becomes a moral dilemma.
Yeah. And honestly, what's wrong with just simply going the old-fashioned route and just praying? Instead of having to go through all these scientific solutions for your desperate need to have a child, how about you just accept God's will for your life? And if he grants you one, it's a blessing. If he doesn't, accept his will. I know that's not what you want to hear in these kinds of situations, but that is the morally acceptable approach to this issue. We're not all going to get blessed with children, but if we are, we should be grateful. If we're not, we should still be grateful.
I know many women who can't have children, and I'm among them. I medically can't have children. But I've got a very close friend who would be the perfect mother. She loves children, good around children, but she is not able to have children due to a medical issue.
Right.
And, sometimes we've had talks, and sometimes, you just have to realize maybe you're meant to be an aunt to all of these children you come in contact with. And you don't know until they get older how much of an impact you have on them.
Right.
So nourish and love the children that you're around. and grasp onto that.
Exactly. I mean, that's a bit besides the point of the question. The question is what is happening with these.
Yeah, we kind of got off on a tangent. But.
And I would say that it is in the same level of moral dilemma, as Father Chris puts it, as abortion. You're kind of towing that line. So I can say that while I would like to be able to say that there's some kind of merciful solution, and I still think that at some level there is, which is not an excuse to be like, well, abortion doesn't matter because God's going to take care of it. That's not what I'm saying. And that's definitely not what you should be thinking.
Because it matters to you.
Yes.
Right.
But I will say that in my experience as a paranormal investigator and as a person that works on that side of this spirituality, my experience with aborted children has not been favorable. It does not seem to be, well, all I can say is if you've ever done a paranormal investigation at a former abortion clinic, you probably will retire after that experience if you ever do it, because it is.
That's why I don't want to do that.
No, it's horrific.
That's one of the places I will not go to.
It is horrific. It is horrific. Now, granted, my students know that there is a difference between spirits and souls, and typically it's the spirits that are tormented, not so much the souls. But that gets into a whole other metaphysical arena that's outside, I think, the scope of the question, which is mostly theological. So I would say anything that even remotely comes close to messing around with embryos or abortion is to be avoided by the Christian. Okay, because I don't care what your laws are. I don't care what your beliefs are. You don't have the luxury. I was telling someone the other day, we don't as Christians have the luxury of having an opinion on this. All right. You don't have the luxury of an opinion. I don't care if you think that, you can be politically pro-choice. I am, because I don't believe in making laws based upon my religious convictions, and I don't believe in creating more laws. So I'm pro-choice politically, but I am as anti-abortion as a person could possibly be, short of I would never blow up a clinic. I'm not that kind of violent person. However, I am adamantly against, morally on every level, abortion, and I have no tolerance for it whatsoever. And as Christians, we don't have the luxury of having an opinion on that. If you're a Christian, you need to err on the side of life always, because that's what Jesus did. And that's always the obligation of the Christian, because we are creatures of life living in a civilization of death. And Christians are, what makes us stand apart is that very distinction, that everything else is dying, but we strive for salvation. We strive for eternal life as Jesus taught us. And we don't have the luxury of arbitrarily making laws or passing, opinions that decide or judge a person's fitness for life, or what is life, or who should be here and who shouldn't be here. If God allowed something to be implanted to the point that they are coming to a healthy pregnancy, who are you to stop that? Who are you to prevent that from happening? And I get it. I understand all the other arguments. Okay. I get it. I get the whole thing about how is it right to bring unwanted children into the world, and the adoption system is absolutely corrupt. Are they better off dead? I mean, I guess an argument could be made socially that maybe some of these children would be then ending up in foster care or these orphanages or whatever. Maybe that's true. But the reality is we're just looking at it from the moral standpoint of what the church, what we have to work with theologically. It's not like the church is trying to mandate something or make something up. It's working with what it understands to be the message of Christ. And the message of Christ is about life. It's not about death. Okay. And we also know from scripture that unborn children were definitely seen as people. John the Baptist leaping in the womb. Okay. The importance that the early church put on the Annunciation, even over Christmas. The Annunciation came first, Christmas was a much later holiday. One of the very first, if not the first feast of the church was the Annunciation, the conception of Mary. That's powerful, and that's important to understand the mind of the early Christian on the value of the unborn child. Okay,
that is the moments of the incarnation.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah,
Christmas is the nativity.
The nativity. That's not the incarnate. Correct, and that's what people don't seem to understand. Is that Jesus arrived in the conception. He didn't arrive in the manger. He arrived in the womb of the Virgin.
Oh, they didn't beam him down?
No, they didn't beam him down.
Oh.
No. Maybe he would have liked to have been beamed down, but the Father didn't permit that. So probably not the answer that people want to hear, I know, but it is the reality of it. And it's not like we're Christians and we're right-wing extremists, which we're going to talk about a lot tonight, actually. It's not that. That's not what we're doing here, and that's not the purpose or intent. It is simply that the church can only work through the theology it has, okay? And this is Judeo-Christian theology, and the church has to preserve it. That's its obligation. Every bishop, myself included, had to take an oath, essentially, a consecrated oath to uphold the true and correct theology, all right? We don't have the luxury of teaching heresy here. So even if our personal opinions, and I'm sure there are bishops out there that probably don't think abortion's a big deal. I'm sure they're out there. They probably never verbalize that, but I know they're out there. They don't even have the luxury of teaching that, even if they personally believe that, if that's their personal conviction. They can't teach that because that's against the mind of the church. It's against what the theology has taught us about it. And we have to uphold that.
Because fundamentally we believe it's against God's will.
Yeah, exactly.
That it comes from God.
Yeah. And the Jewish worldview, children were like the highest sacred thing. Having children was like the most sacred thing that God could do for you. So to just throw that away in such a brutal and vicious and violent way is an unacceptable thing for the Christian. It's unacceptable for everybody, but I can only speak for Christians. Okay. So my opinion is this: if you don't have any affiliation to the Christian faith and you don't want one, then all the power to you. Go and do what you want to do. And I hope that the laws of the United States of America, at least, that the Constitution protects your freedom to be that way. Because I would die for that, for your sake. I would lose my life to protect those freedoms so that you could continue to be a rotten asshole. Okay. To have the freedom to be that way. However, that being said, I'm also a bishop, and that means I have to teach the correct tenets of the faith. Okay. To Christians. So if you want to claim to be a Christian, you don't have the luxury of believing in abortion. You don't have it. I'm sorry. So you might find internal conflict. Welcome to the club. We all have internal conflicts. There's always going to be something that your convictions seem to differ with what the church teaches somewhere, even if it's a minor thing. There's always going to be something. This is a major thing, though. But either way, you can hold those convictions to yourself, but you can't do anything about them. If you want to claim to be Christian, you have to uphold what the church teaches, and the church teaches against that fundamentally. And, this is one of the places where almost all denominations kind of agree, which is kind of a remarkable thing. Catholics might get the reputation for being the real pro-life, nutcases, but, most Protestants are against abortion too. Fundamentally, I can't think of any Christian sects out there that say abortion's okay. So it's interesting that this is one thing that unifies us, because there's not much that does. And I think
Christianity is not the only religion that falls on the side of life either.
No, it's not.
We just get all the negative.
But Islam has provisions for abortion.
Right.
I don't think Buddhism really cares. I'm not sure Hinduism has any doctrine against it. So it's the most verbal, and it's the most visible one against it. But we were talking about fertilization and why that's not, a valid course of action. But we can just hope and trust that God can take care of it. I do think Mother Angelica, almost said Mother Teresa. Mother Angelica on EWTN said it best. She used to say this: all she can say for sure is that when you die, God's not done with you yet.
Right.
And I kind of hold to that. I agree with that. It's not just a kind of, grandmotherly, old nun, Catholic kind of cliche.
She was adorable.
She was.
She really was adorable.
I used to like watching her. She was very,
I did too
very
before I was
conservative,
Catholic.
Yeah, I don't know if she would have liked me too much, but I mean, she was very conservative. But she was very, very. She had a good heart. I think a good spirit to her.
Absolutely.
She was genuine and sincere, and I agree with her on that. I think that is true. I think when we die, God's not done with us yet. So I have faith that there's other opportunities or something that is there for these kinds of situations that we have failed to find solutions for. But I can tell you this, no matter what, legislation is not the answer. It is a moral problem. Churches, if there's too many abortions going on, it's not the failure of the Supreme Court. It's not the failure of the President of the United States. It's not the failure of the Liberal Party, that endorses it largely. It is the failure of the individual and their moral constitution and their church to be able to connect to that individual and teach them correct doctrine. It is the failure of that, not legislation. We never need more laws to govern our moral behavior. That's a very dangerous road to go down. And that's why I'm pro-choice politically. Doesn't mean I like abortion. I hate abortion. I'd never have one, and I don't agree with it. And I don't agree with anyone who does have one. But I don't believe my religion should dictate to you to tell you can't. I think that should come from you. You should know better. You should know better. You shouldn't need the government to tell you not to do it. You should know already not to do it. All right. But that's your problem. That's not mine. And it's definitely not the U.S. government's problem. Okay. So we're now, we got about 11 minutes before the top of the segment, because we're not going to be able to do this in the right timing because the show was all messed up and we started like a half hour late. So we've got 11 minutes before the end of the first hour. So I want to kind of set the stage here a little bit. This is where we're going to get a little controversial.
Okay. More scotch.
Yeah, we might need a little more scotch. So like I said, you could get offended by what I'm about to say here tonight because I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to let the Holy Spirit kind of guide me through this, but I'm not going to hold back because there are some issues here that I have to address. And again, you might say like, oh, this is opportunistic, Bishop. Understand I am a bishop. Okay. Yeah. This show is about entertainment and I try to keep it informal. I don't dress up like a bishop for the show because I want to keep it accessible and approachable. But there are times where I have to speak about certain things that go on. And, there's been a lot that's going on, and it just so happened to fall in the same week that we're having the show on cults. And I need to kind of preface what I'm going to be talking about here in the next 2 hours. Okay, so next hour I'm going to kind of give you what you want because we did that little survey on YouTube, and you all said that your favorite episode, at least half of you said your favorite episode is when I talk on a topic. So you're getting that tonight, and I'm going to teach you about cults tonight. And it's kind of interesting because I've been accused of being a cult. I've been accused of being a cult leader. The Nicolaitan Church has been accused of being a cult.
We're a horrible cult.
We are a terrible cult. If we are a cult, we are terrible. And you're going to find through what academia now is considering to be a good methodology for identifying a cult, you're going to find that I can guarantee you that each and every single one of you belongs to a cult at some point because the definition is absolutely so... it's so pervasive. It is so open. It is so open to interpretation.
It's generic. It's just generic, so wide and
that
all-encompassing.
You're going to find that you belong to a cult by these definitions that are being used today, which is now I understand why people are like, oh, you're a cult leader. I get it now because it's like, well, of course, if you're using these definitions, then of course, all of us are cult leaders. So we're going to get into that, and I'm going to try to bring it up on the screen so you can read along with me when we get to it. But I wanted to mention here tonight that to get us started before we get really into this, we'll take our little break and then we'll get into the meat here. But I asked Dr. Stephen Hassan to come on the show tonight to talk about his BITE model of authoritarian control. That's what we're going to be referencing tonight as the methodology for identifying cults. I couldn't speak to him. I could not reach him directly, but I reached his press secretary or whoever it was that represented him. And, they had a lot of questions that were suspect to me, like how many people listen to your show? They asked me that more than once. I answered it and they asked it again. So clearly these were issues that were like, is this worth going on this show? Am I really going to do it? And then they came back and said, well, he's booked up for the next 12 months. So try again in a year. And it's like, okay, well, I can read between the lines. I'm not sure that, even I'm a pretty busy person. I don't book up a year in advance. So maybe he does, but I am suspect of that. I really think it had more to do with the fact that he was taken aback by the fact that there was a church that was wanting to interview him about this, because I didn't know anything about it other than the fact that I was told it was a leading model for understanding how academia approaches the subject of identifying cults. So I thought, well, this is a good person to have on. He's got a methodology. He teaches this stuff. Let's ask him. And as I mentioned, I can't remember if I mentioned it at the top of this show or the one that failed to finish when we started the show the first time. But I always when I bring a new guest on, I don't try to read too much about their content because I like to learn firsthand with my audience. Right. So if I don't automatically already know something about something, and I knew next to nothing about the BITE model of authoritarian control, I was like, let's get Dr. Stephen Hassan on the show. And he can teach me about it. And then after he comes on, then I'll do my full research on everything else. Maybe have him back on to talk about it in more detail. But I don't have the luxury to do that because either he didn't want to come on or couldn't come on. I don't know. But I took it upon myself because I knew I wanted to do this show. You guys requested this show. And I said, well, I might have to kind of learn this myself and figure out how to approach the BITE model myself and talk about it. So I read about it on his website, freedomofmind.com. And he runs the Freedom of Mind Resource Center. And in there, you can find throughout different parts. It's not absolutely blatant, but it's there if you read between the lines. It's pretty blatant
to me.
Well, I mean, I guess it is. He clearly has a bone to pick with conventional religion. And I think that has influenced his model that we're going to be looking at tonight. And you're going to see that there's parts of it. Look, I'm going to still say that it's a useful model. I'm still going to say that. However, I'm also going to say that it does pose some problems to the degree that you could generalize some of these things to the point where it would apply to almost every religion that you talk to. And more.
And that could make things dangerous.
It could. And it's problematic because if this is what academia is teaching, then it's definitely coming from a very atheist point of view.
Well, but probably because he believes it.
I think so. And he has a background with the Moonies. So he belonged to a cult. At least that's what I think I read, right?
Yeah, very scary cult.
Maybe that's probably influenced him too. And I know that they had some Roman Catholic bishops involved in that. So, I mean, it definitely got some people on board. But, I think it's influenced him a bit. I don't know. I would love to have him on to clear this up. And maybe he would come on and talk to us about clearing this up. But I'm going to be very cautious with how I approach this. And then I'm going to give you my own basic assessment for how you do it. And I'm going to use the BITE model because I do think there's good data in there. I think it too.
Well, you're back with us.
Yeah. I think we've lost YouTube. Yeah, it's done.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
I think we just have to
we're getting in the meat of it.
I think we might have to just do this at another time.
Oh.
I don't know if, this internet's just not going to cooperate. I mean, I can't we're not going to, it'll be another half hour to get it going again.
I think you might be back on.
Are we?
Yeah, you're back on.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Then how come I can't see it?
It says you were back. Cassie, we got you.
All right, let me see if I can find it now because I don't see that I'm back.
Everybody's saying we're back.
We are. Okay. Oh my goodness. Look at that. We are back. let me make sure that, okay, I did. Yeah, we are back. Look at that. I can't believe it. All right. Sorry, guys. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. Okay. So look, when I say, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. When I say that we need your support to keep this show going, if you get value out of this, please support it financially, because the church has to pay for all of this itself, and what it needs to be able to correct these problems, it does not have the benefit of spending on. If I put all the money into this show, we wouldn't have the money to run the ministry. Okay, I have to save some of our resources for that. I mean, so please consider giving a special donation, a special pledge, a monthly pledge to help keep this show on the air, because I don't know how much more we can continue to put up with this, but let me check to see. Right now, what I'm looking at right now is I'm just checking to see if there's anything that I can do to try to boost the signal to at least this broadcast. I'm going to check to see if it needs anything.
Probably a good time to go to break.
Yeah, I mean, maybe right now we're going to go to break. I was in the middle of something important, but I guess I'll just say it when I come back. So let's go ahead and take our break right now. When we come back, I'm going to start talking about cults, how to identify them, but we're also going to break up exactly what is involved in the entire process of, well, just how pervasive it really is. And it might be a good idea also to go on Spreaker, on our Spreaker channel, and just have that link on backup, because if YouTube goes down, at least you can listen to us there. We'll be back, hopefully, after this. Welcome back, everyone. It looks like we're still here. By the grace of God, we are still here. If that's not proof that God exists, I don't know what to tell you. But we were talking about some solutions. I think we're going to have a board meeting here soon, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. But right now, we're back for the second half, the second part, rather, of Vestiges After Dark. We're going to get into the meat of cults tonight. And I'm going to start you off with some disturbing material. It's going to make you think. Again, this is not for the faint of heart. If you're easily offended, turn this off. Okay? But if you are willing to take the plunge into a larger universe, stick around. We'll be back in a moment. Everybody. So we're going to have a board meeting, and I think we have decided that the best solution is going to be to get the front part of the property, the front 10 acres, rezoned commercial. And I'm going to talk to our attorney to see what needs to be done in order to start that process, because once that is commercial, Comcast will put the fiber optic line in. We'll have a gigabyte upload and download speed with more bandwidth than we know what to do with. And I don't think we'll have any of these issues anymore. So I don't know if we can get that all done before the end of this season, but hopefully by the time we start season 8, I think it will be something that will be in the cards. So we're going to work on that. Okay. So, okay. I'm going to show you something. Okay. This is kind of this was disturbing to me. Now, all of you know, I mean, nobody, unless you were living in a box for the last couple days, you've heard about the shooting in Tennessee. Okay. A individual went into a school that she used to go to, I guess, 10 years ago, and went in and shot her way into the side of the school, and also killed 3 adult administrators and 3 9-year-old children. And then she was shot dead herself. Thankfully, honestly, I would say that somebody that would do something as horrendous as that, I mean, I would say bring back the methods that we used to use in the golden age of piracy. I'd say put their corpse on a freaking lamppost and leave it there so that everyone sees what happens to people that do terroristic acts. I'm sick of them calling this school shooting. This is not a school shooting. This is a shooting that happened at a school. This is an act of domestic terrorism, and that is a terrorist. Okay. But my interest is not so much in that. And of course, everyone's jumping on the right wing, at least, is jumping on the bandwagon that this is a transgendered person.
So what?
And I'm like, okay, what's that have to do? I mean, first of all, okay, the problem with that is that, she's not doing them any favors. Okay. And I do understand. I mean, there's been so much confusion in the media about this. I think it's a biological female who saw herself as a male, as I understand it. But my problem with this has nothing to do with the transgenderism.
The only relevance would be if she'd had hormone treatment, because there could be a question made about the effects.
The rage.
Hormones on.
Yeah, none of that information's come out yet.
That's not come out.
Right.
But, I mean, there's another side of it, and I know it's not a popular opinion, but I'm going to qualify what I'm going to say here by first saying that, first of all, I always support everybody where they're at in their life. I always support people's highest authenticity. So I'm not really concerned with how you see yourself or what you believe yourself to be, as much as I am just concerned about your spiritual life. And that's the only part of you that I care about. It's the only part of you that I see. Okay, so if a gay person comes to me, if a transgendered person comes to me, if anybody in any of these various crazy categories that we keep creating for ourselves comes to me, they're going to get the same love and care that I'd give anybody. Okay, I want to make that clear before I say my next part. This is where it gets controversial. Okay, and believe it or not, this has everything to do with what we're talking about with cults tonight, because I do think that some of this that happened in Tennessee is the result of cult mentality. And this is where it's going to get controversial. Okay. Do not misunderstand me. Okay. And do not judge or misjudge what I'm about to say, because I want to make sure that I have prefaced, maybe reiterated again. I care for every single individual where they're at. I do not try to change anybody. I do not try to, make people feel bad about themselves. Okay. I just care about, who you are, and I meet you where you're at. Okay. So I don't have any prejudices or biases against anybody. I'm not transphobic. I'm not homophobic. I've got plenty of friends that fall into those categories. And I love them all equally to my straight friends. Does not matter to me. Okay. I don't care about people's sexualities or their identities. But that being said, as a person who was educated in the field of psychology before all this shit went down, okay, politically, I'm saying shit politically. All right. And still is, I should say, the diagnosis of gender dysphoria is still a mental illness as far as I'm concerned. Okay. It is in the DSM. It is still, as far as I know, still in the DSM. It certainly was when I went to school, when I got my degree in psychology. And it is problematic from the standpoint that, how sad is it that you're so unhappy with who you are that you have to believe yourself to be something other than what you are in order to think to find happiness? And typically what you see with people that do go through the extreme procedures of hormone treatment or even surgeries to get things amputated or changed, it doesn't increase their happiness or their suicidal ideation or any of the other problems associated. You know what? Want to know why that is? Because it's still mental illness and it's not being treated because it's being enabled. And see, when I was a dumb psychology student going through the motions of trying to become a clinician one day, we were taught that the last thing you ever did with a particular patient was enable their delusions or whatever it is that they were suffering from. So if you have a person who's suicidal and has major depressive disorder, the one thing you don't do as a therapist is enable that by saying, yeah, you're right. Your life doesn't matter. No one cares about you. You're right. Life sucks. No one's going to care if you even die. So just go die. That's not treatment, folks. That's not treatment. But apparently that is treatment when you're talking about a person who has a gender dysphoria. We're going to enable that delusion, though. That's okay. In fact, you're mean and you're nasty and you're transphobic if you don't. That's cult behavior, folks. And it does, because the reason that you don't enable delusions, like if you have a person who suffers from psychosis and they think that there's butterflies coming through the walls to kill them, it doesn't help their psychosis to be like, yeah, I see the butterflies too. Oh, look out, they're coming after you. You don't do that with a schizophrenic client. But yet with a gender dysphoria client, we're supposed to give them a license to go get their penises chopped off or something. I have a real problem with that. And now it's going into where, now let's do this to kids. Okay. Before you have not even formed your personality. This is another thing I learned in undergraduate school as a student of psychology, that your personality doesn't even form until you're the age of 22. Okay. And yet, we're going to have like young kids change their gender because that's the socially acceptable thing. This is cult behavior.
Kids are puberty.
This is cult behavior. Now, the reason you don't enable a person with a mental illness like this is because it can lead, not always, but it can lead to extremes of behavior. And it can lead to extremism in their life. And so I am not saying that this incident wouldn't have happened anyway. Okay, everybody. So as you can see there, a terrible place for this to have cut out because, obviously this is a relatively controversial subject. And I think it's important to finish the thought so that there's no confusion. Because honestly, I mean what I say, and I get a lot of criticism in the Christian community for having this position, but I will always meet people where they're at. I will always respect their freedom to be whatever they want to be. But that does not imply or entitle that individual to my participation. Okay, that's the difference. And as a person who spent a great part of my life working in psychology, even to this day, I mean, so much of what I do, even as a bishop, is still very much in the realm of healing at the psychological and emotional level. Okay, I just use spirituality now as a tool, whereas before I didn't or couldn't. But now I can, and I do. And I can say that I cannot disregard what science and psychology has taught us about this. Okay, delusions are never to be supported. And reality, while it is sometimes difficult to accept, is reality. And the only ethical thing to do as a clinician is to help that person achieve to a better understanding of reality. Psychology is not doing that anymore, to the degree that they have even changed the very definitions of gender dysphoria. Now it is being classified as only gender dysphoria if the person is disturbed by their gender dissonance. But if they're content with it, then it's not considered gender dysphoria anymore. What? So it's all arbitrary. You know what that means? If you're going to make the entire DSM arbitrary, then you got to throw the whole damn thing out, which means that, maybe you're not really depressed. Maybe you're just got a bad attitude. Maybe you're not really suicidal. Maybe you just have a obsession with death, and you should explore that. And I really do think that kind of thinking can lead to the kind of extremism that led to the shooting. Now, I want to qualify that because I wasn't allowed to before the stream cut out last week. I am not saying, as I got cut off there, I am not saying that this wouldn't have happened if she had received optimal treatment with whatever treatment she was actually going for. I don't know. I can't make that assessment. But what I can say is that we were taught and we were trained that there are great risks and dangers to feeding a delusional person's delusions that can lead to violence and other types of actions of extremism and radicalization. Okay. Particularly if they've got a lot of support for it. And that's what a cult is, you see. A cult, and this is one of the things that the bite model we're going to look at here in a minute, fails. Because what it doesn't really demonstrate clearly, and we're going to go through it step by step, so hopefully maybe having a third or fourth look at it for myself, I'll have different opinions. Sometimes when I read something several times, I get different opinions about it each time. But I don't feel it's clear enough about the one major point of what differentiates a cult from everything else. And that is it feeding a definitive delusion or misinterpretation of reality that a greater majority would see as something else. So there's nothing more objective than your DNA. It doesn't lie. Okay? It doesn't lie. So you can believe yourself to be whatever you want. You could believe yourself to be a man, a woman, a dog, or a cat. But your DNA is still going to determine, and no matter what you convert yourself to with all the treatments in the world, your DNA is still going to show you as being what you are. And so for this school shooter, her DNA, no matter what, will always be a human female. Okay? That's not something you can dispute. That's not something you can arbitrarily decide to be different. That's reality. And in my school of psychology is we need to help people to come back to reality, not push them further into delusion. Because I think bad things happen when you do that. And I think she's been radicalized by the mentality, because it was obviously an attack on a Christian school for the intent of, I mean, we haven't seen the manifesto yet, but I would bet you anything it comes back to that, because the police in their initial statement implied when they looked at it. They just didn't want to say it because I guess the FBI took the document and won't release it, probably because of this reason. And let's face it, I mean, the trans community is getting more support than the families who are the victims of this fucking disaster. How sick is that? How sick is that? Now, okay, look, I understand that there's going to be people that are going to be opportunistic and use this as a weapon against the trans community. I get that. I get it. But now's not the time. This is not your fucking problem right now, okay? The problem is the victims' families. And that offends me. That offends me. And that's radicalization. So why are you bringing this up? What does this have to do with cults? Well, let me explain, okay? What it has to do with cults is that we have this impression that cults are like drinking the Kool-Aid out there in, where is it? South America, whatever. You think David Koresh, you think Heaven's Gate, let's kill ourselves so we can go up to the UFO. You think crazy spiritual nutcases. But what you're not thinking about is your political affiliations. And you're not thinking about your social activist groups. And you're not thinking about your biases and your paradigms that rule your life. And you've allowed in that level, at that capacity, to take over all of your thinking and all of your feelings. That you're not free anymore. You're a prisoner. So, see, it's not just being a clinician that makes me form the opinions that I've shared with you tonight. It is, additionally, the fact that I am also a person who believes and must, by virtue of my oath, to bring people to the highest authenticity that they possibly can. And so, I mean, I've made the decision, and I know this is a difficult one. I've already announced it on the Nicolayan Network, but I'm going to announce it here publicly. I will always stand by the people that the LGBTQIA plus political entity claims to support. I will always be behind them. I will always support them, but I will not support the LGBTQIA plus political identity, because that is a cult. And you're going to see tonight that not all cults come in the Heaven's Gate or David Koresh variety. It's a political cult. And it's a different type of deification of a leader or ideology. Is one of the things that we're going to see. Okay. I'm also going to share with you how we can break this down to be a lot more simple than the bite model. But I know that's going to be unpopular, and I'm going to get, I'm going to get thumbs down on this video. Go right ahead, hurt the channel. I don't care. You think I care? I'm about the truth. Okay. If I didn't care about the truth, I'd be, the donations would be rolling in. I mean, I'd be like Joel Osteen, flying on my private jet everywhere I want to go. That's the kind of, bishop you want me to be. I could have been that. You're not going to get that kind of bishop, because that's not me. Okay. I'm about reality. Yeah. Hence all of the last 10 minutes. Okay. Joining me. And, one more thing. we're going to try to get through the rest of this show without a commercial break, just to kind of make up for all of the craziness, and I don't want to waste time. And we kind of got off on some tangents in the first hour, as you saw in that recording from last week. So we're going to try to get more on task tonight, and kind of stick to it. So if I need to take a break, if we start like getting a little shaky or something, we need to stand up and stretch, I might take a short one. But I'm going to try to get through this next 2 hours all the way, or actually an hour and a half, all the way to the end. Okay. Joining me tonight is Tracy, and you can go ahead and say hello. Let's see if your microphone works.
Hi.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to, she's going to help me here to watch for your questions in the chat room. Now, Jamie usually logs in through the secondary cell router and watches the chat and writes down questions as they come. We're not going to take any questions until probably about 11 or so. I'll put the number up on the screen, and you can call into the show. We got Skype working. So Skype, I didn't realize, was not working the last few shows, but it's back. And, of course, from the chat room as well. But I wanted to preface with that I'm not targeting, I'm not targeting trans people, okay? I just have a problem with the LGBTQIA plus political entity that tries to lump all these individuals into some kind of common group. There's nothing in common psychologically between a person's sexual orientation and their sexual identity. Nothing at all in common with that. There is nothing in common with a gay person or a lesbian with a trans person. They don't belong in the same category. The psychology is completely different. Okay. And who you decide to love, be it a person of the opposite sex or a person of the same sex, is actually an expression of your highest authenticity. That's why I absolutely will always support gay men and lesbians, because I feel that that's an expression of their highest authenticity. But see, I see transgenderism as a refusal to accept one's highest authenticity. And I see it as a self-esteem issue that needs to be resolved, and psychology is now enabling them to become sicker, instead of trying to help them to come back to the reality of who they are. I know that's an unpopular opinion today. Okay. But you have to understand, all right, I graduated psychology, I got my degree in the 90s. Not that long ago, but it was a very different world from the one we live in today. Okay. And I'm old school when it comes to education. I don't believe in making modifications because it's socially convenient. But that's also what cults do, and we're going to see that. You're going to see how cult-like that is. And that was just one example. We can look at others if you want. We can look at Donald Trump so that the liberals don't feel left out. I know that Dr. Stephen Hassan, has a whole category on the cult of Trump. So I think we know where his political affiliations lie. He doesn't like religion. He doesn't like Donald Trump. Sounds a little radical to me, actually, but I don't know. I don't want to speak badly about the guy. I can't talk to him. Didn't want to come on the show or couldn't come on the show. No time. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to use this model here. I'm going to try to do it with the best in mind, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of bias here. And I'm reading through between the lines. So let me start with the BITE model. And kind of explain to you how it works. Okay, so essentially it is based on one general principle, and that is something that is referred to as undue influence. Okay, so you have to interpret the BITE model always in relation to its effect. These and there's lots of points, and we might not even be able to get to them all. I hope that I can. That's why I don't want to necessarily take a break tonight, because I'm just not sure. But undue influence is when there's any act of persuasion, according to the Freedom of Mind Resource Center. I'm going to quote here. Undue influence is any act of persuasion that overcomes the free will and judgment of another person. Okay? So people can be unduly influenced by deception, by flattery, by trickery, by coercion, and other techniques, including hypnosis. In the court of law, undue influence is a legal term which involves a person or group taking advantage of their position of power over another person or persons. Well, that sounds like just about every political institution that exists today. Liberal or conservative, I don't care what you pick one. Pick one, okay? And if you hear the kitty in the background, Heathcliff followed Tracy down here, and he does not like the fact that we're down here right now. He thinks we should be upstairs relaxing with a scotch, because that's what we're usually doing at this time of night. We're not on a Saturday. We're not usually down here doing the show on the off night. He knows the week. Believe it or not, Heathcliff knows the week. So if you hear the cat in the background, I'm sorry, he just followed us down, okay?
We didn't have Mass either.
We did not have Mass, so he's really very confused. And he's not going to like next week because there's a liturgy every single day. He's going to be like, you guys have lost your minds. Did you join a cult? I mean, what is this? That's what he's going to be saying to us. Oh, anyway, okay, so undue influence is any act of persuasion that overcomes the free will and judgment of another person, okay? And can be influenced by deception, flattery, trickery, or coercion. So right now, this is why coercion's the big one for me, because this is the one where, again, using the example of the LGBTQIA plus political entity, their entire methodology is coercion. It's all about coercion. And you can even say techniques of hypnosis, because hypnosis is not, putting the little pendulum in front of someone, or, making them count backwards from 100, or getting them into a meditative state with breathing techniques. Hypnosis can also be subconscious manipulation, or, a subconscious suggestion, which is what happens when you inundate television or commercials and everything, where you're trying to normalize a kind of thing for your own benefit. Because that's what cults do. They take something that has never been normal and try to make it normal by inundating you with it on every direction, so that eventually you subconsciously start to feel like it's normal. And if you can get children involved in this at an early age, then that's very easy, because then you can coerce them very simply. All right, you don't have to go through so much effort. That's the real problem, okay, with LGBTQIA plus and everything. And Trump's the same thing. So I'm not going to pick on you, on the liberals, because I know a lot of liberals like the LGBTQIA plus. Okay, look, I love the people. I can't stand the politics of it. All right, don't separate yourself. Okay, you, if you're gay or if you're trans or whoever you are right now listening to this, you probably have already turned me off and are bitching me out right now. I mean, probably, but stop for a second and listen to what I'm saying. Okay, you are not LGBTQIA plus. You are you. Do not let these entities, these political systems, control who you think you are. I will always support your highest authenticity. They are not interested in that. They're interested in your compliance, and they want mine too. They're not going to get it. They're not going to get it. I don't comply with bullshit. All right, which is why it's laughable to me when people accuse me of being a cult leader. Yeah. Good luck with that. So, what is the BITE model? So it basically is broken up. B stands for behavior control. I for information control, T for thought control, and E for emotional control. Okay. And so I'm going to try. Let me see if I can bring this up on the screen. I don't know if this is going to work. I think it will. Let's try to enlarge it so we can make it easier for you to read. And for those of you, at least on YouTube, should be able to see this. Obviously, if you're listening on the podcast, you'll have to depend on me reading it. But it looks like it's up there. So we're going to look at the left box here. Okay, we're going to do that one first, because that's the B. So behavior control. So let's look at some of these points. So okay, so cults in relation to undue influence. Again, undue influence is necessary to relate these, because if there's no undue influence, then you could actually say parenting your child is cult. That's not undue influence. You are supposed to influence your child. That's part of being a parent. Okay, so regulating an individual's physical reality, well, that's the job of a parent. That doesn't make parents cult leaders, because it's not in relation to undue influence. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind when reading these, and that's where things get sketchy for interpretation. And I think The bite model takes it too far. I really do. But we're going to break it down, okay? So let's look at the first one here. So regulates an individual's physical reality. It dictates where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. When, how, and with whom the member has sex. Now, let's talk about that one for a minute, okay? I don't know what this means. I mean, are you talking about David Koresh, where he's like, give me all the 13-year-old girls, they're mine, and no one else can have them? Is that the kind of regulation we're talking about here? Or are we talking about when the church says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and only people who are married can have sex? How far are we taking this? Okay, because Christian morality isn't necessarily there to control you. It's there to teach you how to best live in accordance with the morality that God expects from us. But by my saying that, according to this, I might be a cult leader for saying that to you. This is why I have a problem with this model. Because what's undue influence? It's undue influence when a church leader like myself teaches you correct gospel, teaches you correct doctrine. I took an oath to do that as a bishop when I was consecrated to be one. Would I not be a hypocrite if I didn't do my job? So, I have problems with this, and it makes me wonder, is this why he didn't want to come on? Because did he not want to be confronted with these kinds of questions? I wasn't going to attack him for it. I just wanted clarification. What does he mean by when, who, how, and with whom a member has sex? How far are we taking that? Yeah, I get it when you're talking about David Koresh. I don't get it when you're teaching what the Bible teaches about marriage. Controls types of clothing and hairstyles. Well, I mean, I think all churches do that. Not so much hairstyles, but I guess if you came in with some do. Yeah. Orthodox churches don't really take well to, if you came in with a T-shirt that said, fuck the world, you're probably going to ask to leave.
Well, you could also argue veiling, the hijab, or certain types of non-showy dress and like conservative denominations of Christianity.
Yeah.
Women must wear skirts and dresses, no pants, things like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, this is a bit problematic from any kind of way that you slice it, because I am not sure you can generalize this, because I would think if we asked Dr. Hassan based upon other things that I've read on his website, I'm not sure that would not be considered undue influence. Mm-hmm. Because it is depriving a person of their freedom to the degree that you're teaching a Christian bishop's job is to teach a Christian how to surrender to God, to surrender to God instead of giving into themselves. But there's a very self-centeredness to this that doesn't seem to differentiate correctly how we are to look at cults. And then we can just throw it back at other things like we talked about with political affiliations. Okay, so they don't control types of clothing or hairstyle, although some do. But, in the first world, you don't typically see that. When, how, and with whom the member has sex. We don't really see that too much. But we're going to get to some things here you're going to see in a moment that are very cult-like in politics. Regulate diet, food and drink, hunger, and or fasting. He puts fasting in there. Okay, so when I told everybody that the church upholds on Fridays abstinence from meat, and on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday fasting, is that a cult?
Yeah.
By this standard, right? Undue influence, maybe?
There's definitely been a push on, that I can see on social media to the idea that all religions, but particularly Christianity, are cults. It's definitely been a push. There's a call, for, parents who raise their children in religion are brainwashing their children. So yeah, I think it's very easy for people to fall into that pattern.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a problem with that one. Okay, so let's look at number 7, financial exploitation, manipulation, and dependence. All right, so what's financial exploitation? Is it teaching people that their obligation is to tithe? I missed one. Manipulation and deprivation of sleep. That's number 6. Okay, well, churches don't typically do that. And political institutions don't typically do that. But I can tell you right now,
I mean, you could argue the monks in the monastery.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking Buddhists.
Yeah.
Try to move your microphone because you're hitting your head into the mic and it's kind of reverberating. And there we go. Yeah, there we go. Right. You'll get used to it.
My bad.
No worries. Okay, bring it a little bit closer to you. Just try to keep your.
I'm afraid I'll hit it.
Okay, well then talk into it more because you're a little bit distant now. Okay, so financial exploitation, manipulation, independence. Okay, so I mean, I know that a lot of some cults will require people to give everything they have and come live in the commune. So that's a clear, obvious one. And I think that's kind of the image people have of cults. So that one makes sense to me. But I mean, what's financial exploitation and manipulation? I mean, it is the Christian's obligation to tithe 10% of their income. Nobody does it. Nobody does it. But there are denominations or different churches where people do take that more seriously. I know Mormons are really big tithers. And I wouldn't necessarily consider the Mormon church to be Christian because they kind of refute a lot of the tenets of the Nicene Creed, but they're good tithers. I wish we had some of those kinds of tithers in our church because we'd be able to do more. But yeah, I mean, is it cult-like to teach people that 10% of their income is considered to be a viable tithe? I don't think so, but apparently, according to Dr. Hassan, that's cult-like. Number 8, restrict leisure, entertainment, and vacation time. Yeah, I mean, the more extreme groups would do that. It's a pretty obvious one. I don't think you're going to see too much of that in conventional churches. Number 9, major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. Okay, now this one is a big one for if you're talking about political affiliations. Major time spent with group indoctrination. Isn't that what every special interest group is out to do? How about self-indoctrination, including the internet? I mean, LGBTQI plus thrives on that kind of thing with Twitter
TikTok.
And everything. TikTok thrives. And of course, Donald Trump. Okay, so I'm gonna try to be fair here. I'm not gonna look. I'm a libertarian. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I've got positions that both would agree and disagree with. Okay, so I'm neither of those things. But I do know that LGBTQI plus tends to be a platform for the liberals, and I know that Donald Trump tends to be a platform for the conservatives, and they're both very cult-like according to this model. If we're going to get technical here, and I actually do agree with this one: major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. But then again, major time spent, what's that considered? I mean, obviously, I don't think that includes going to mass on Sunday. I don't even think it includes going to daily mass. But what about a monastery where all you do all day is the divine office and various Christian rituals? Is that cult? But I mean, the more I read the Bite model, the more I see cults in politics than I do in religion. It's funny. Permission required for major decisions. That's very conventional cult. Like, you hear about the, what's that? The Church of Scientology, if you can call that a church.
Yeah, they're talking about it in the chat.
Yeah, that's one where these are obvious points. Okay, and I know that. Well, at least what's been revealed about the Church of Scientology, it looks like there's you have to get permission to do certain things. Rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. Well, I mean, again, are we talking about tangible rewards and punishments? Are we talking about like spiritual ones? I mean, is hell? Are you considering hell to be a punishment that is manipulating people by telling people that hell it does exist and you don't want to go there? Discourage number 12. Discourage individualism, encourage groupthink. Okay. I think churches are guilty of this. I think politics are guilty of this. The groupthink's big right now, right? Because that's what they're pushing. You say anything against the narrative and you're the bad guy.
Well, that goes back to number 11 with the rewards and punishments with political ideology. If you say the wrong thing, you're canceled.
Well, let's talk about LGBTQI plus for a minute. Okay, if I say that transgenderism is mental illness, that's against the narrative. I'm now transphobic. That's my punishment. Okay, and that's discouraging my individuality to have that professional opinion, because that comes from my background in psychology. That doesn't come from a bias. I don't have a bias. Again, I mean, I'm a libertarian. You want to think you're a man when you're a woman? Go ahead. I don't care. That's not my problem. Don't expect me to use your pronouns because I don't buy into people's delusions. But again, that's my psychology training that does that. So, are we talking about you're discouraging my individuality by doing that? You're succumbing to groupthink because, let's face it, this was not the thing that it is today until it became a groupthink problem. And it's really groupthink right now in young generations, okay? Because they've been indoctrinated. We talked about indoctrination here. You see the cult behavior? You see that? Okay. I think that's worse than anything the church does, honestly. And I'll agree. I mean, the church definitely does. Some churches do discourage individualism. That's why they hate me so much. And they encourage groupthink, which I'm not, I hate to say it, but Tracy, I mean, you can testify to this. I'm kind of immune to groupthink.
Yes.
Okay. So, number 14. 13. Impose rigid rules and regulations. Well, what are the 10 Commandments too rigid? Is the gospel too rigid?
Yes.
All right. Punish disobedience by beating, torture, burning, cutting, rape, or tattooing, branding. Okay. Well, if you belong to a church that does that shit, then yeah, you are in a cult. I hate to break it to you. I don't think LGBTQI plus does that. I don't think many, but I mean, they might do that to their enemies. I don't know. I mean, that seems to be what a lot of, and again, I'm talking about the political entity. I'm talking about same thing. Let's look at Black Lives Matter. Okay. Love black people. I have so many black friends, going all the way back to my earliest years. Okay. And I used to support Black Lives Matter when it first came out because I thought it was really about affirming the rights of black people to be represented fairly in law enforcement and everything else. But it became so obvious as time went on. It's just another political cult. I mean, I want to say that I read somewhere that hundreds of thousands of dollars, if I'm not mistaken, was being utilized. Somebody please verify this for me. But I want to say that I read that hundreds of thousands of dollars were being utilized by that charity on prostitution and other things. And nothing's being done about it. That sounds pretty cult-like to me if it's true. Somebody see if you can verify it for me. 15, threaten harm to family and friends. Well, I don't know any church that does that. But I know that cults definitely do that. So that's that. I think 15 is a good one. So let's look at the ones so far that are good here. Let's finish them, then we'll look at them all. Force individual to be raped or rape. Well, that's right up there with David Koresh. Right. Encourage and engage in, corporal punishment. Well, I mean, I know that there are some conservative Christians that believe in corporal punishment of children. I don't agree with that, but I know that there are many that do the spare the rod, spoil the child thing. 18, instill dependency and obedience. Well, I mean, it's kind of the definition of religion. You take a vow of obedience when you enter into religious life, for goodness sake. So how far are we taking? Where's the undue influence? I mean, hopefully it's not considered undue if you willfully join and become ordained. But I'd like to talk to Dr. Hassan about that. I don't know where his mind is with this one, but I guess if you're forced to do it against your will, that's where it's problematic. Nobody should force you to be. I think. Okay, here's what you got to do.
My situational awareness is not very good.
Okay, let me try to help her. Look, I'm gonna move this over so that people can see. I'm gonna try to move this. Hold on, just
it's okay.
a moment.
You can leave it. It's fine.
No, let's do this. Come, bring this out like this. Bring it in like that.
All right.
And have it in front of your face. There we go. I don't know what. There you go. Well, I don't know what. Okay, she's twisted it around like. Okay, there you go. That's gonna be better now. Sorry, folks. Okay.
So you said the Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. It looks like the controversy is that one of the executives siphoned at least $10 million from the organization, and one of the things that he's accused of is buying a mansion.
Okay, so there you go, and I think that was where it was also that there was a prostitution area, most probably that. But I mean, again, what do you need a political institution, okay, to justify you or to make you feel whole and complete? Be that by virtue of who you are. Live your best life. It's the best revenge anyway. If you're really upset with the world, the best thing you can do is live well, because everyone's going to hate you for that. Okay, and they'll be jealous as hell, and you'll teach them that you beat them. Okay, but to affiliate with some kind of political identity just so that you can get the groupthink support, I'm sorry, that's cult-like behavior. And, this is where the BITE model is correct. Of course, I'm not sure Dr. Hassan would apply it to these institutions like I am. But I'm saying that if we're going to be general, and there's nothing to say I can't be general here outside of undue influence. And I think political influence is absolutely undue. I mean, what right does anybody have to tell me how I address them with their pronouns? You don't have a right to that. You don't have a right to enter into my reality and to tell me that your reality is now my reality. That's absolutely cult thinking. Okay? And I'm going to keep referencing back here, not to attack, okay? Just because it's a relevant topic right now, and I want to show you the dark side of affiliating with these political groups, not the people. All right? We are to love everyone, whether you like what they do or how they live or not. And we're supposed to not judge them. Let's not judge them. Okay? We're talking academically about these things, objectively, but also being very hypercritical of the political entity that these things are. Because people are becoming, I mean, it's like LGBTQIA is an identity now. Shouldn't be an identity. It's a political bullshit organization. Don't affiliate with it. They're doing you more harm. They're making straight people, heterosexuals, Christians, they're making them hate you more. Okay? They're making you hate, they're making them hate you more. They're not doing you any favors. I'm doing you a favor right now, but no one's going to see that unless you pay attention. Okay. 19, kidnapping. 20, beating. 21, torture. 22, rape. Well, a
bit redundant, isn't it?
I mean, my God. Why are these even in here?
Well, they've already been mentioned.
They have. 23, separation of families. 24, imprisonment. 25, murder. Well, I guess that could mean abortion is a cult, huh? They don't want to hear that, do they? Okay, so what from this first category can we isolate to be genuine? Which ones do we need to, I think, throw out? I think I think the ones that are very clear, and I'm going to throw out ones, even ones that are on the fence. Okay. I'm going to throw out ones that are on the fence. I'm going to say number 6, manipulation and deprivation of sleep. No decent church, or there's no reason to ever do that. Okay. Political, spiritual, or otherwise. Restrict leisure, entertainment, vacation time. I'm going to put number 8 down as a sign of a cult. Permission required for major decisions. Number 10. That's cult-like behavior. Discourage individualism and encourage groupthink. That is cult behavior, even though I know many churches do it. This is why the Nicolaitan Church does not do this, because I do agree that's cult-like and is not healthy, and it deprives a person of their authenticity and their freedom. And I can't get behind that. Okay, I can't get behind that. No, I can't do that one. 14, yes, punish disobedience by beating, torture, burning, cutting, rape, or tattooing, branding. Yes, that's cult behavior. Threaten harm to family and friends. Yes. Force individual to be raped or be raped. Yes. Encourage and engage in corporal punishment. Yes. Kidnapping, beating, torture, rape, separation of families, imprisonment, and murder. All those are, yes, good ones. I would throw the other ones out because they need more clarification. I wouldn't say that you couldn't put them back in, like regulate an individual's physical reality. Yeah, we can have that, but that needs to be qualified. What does that even mean? Okay, what does that even mean? So now let's look at the second one, information control. All right, here's where you're going to really see politics. So the first one he has as a subset, deception, and he breaks it down in 3 ways. So this is what I would have liked to see with some of the other ones. So let's see, deception. Deliberately withholding information, distort information to make it more acceptable, systematically lie to the cult member. Okay, so this is very difficult to prove anyway. But I would say that a lot of political organizations work on that premise, to systematically lie, to distort information. In fact, the entire legal system, the entire legal profession is built on that very principle right there, which means all lawyers are cult leaders. Okay. Deliberately withhold information. Well, the church kind of does that. It has done that, not so much today, but it has done that. Not this church, but the church, the Roman Catholic
the Universal Church.
The Universal Church has done that. So, I mean, I don't disagree with these, but let's face it. I mean, hopefully you're already noticing just how prolific cult behavior is, that it's not just joining David Koresh in his Branch Davidians compound, being shot up by the FBI.
I mean, everyone's talking about examples that they've got in their lives in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm sure, because it's pretty generic in some places.
I don't think we're streaming.
What? Yeah, we are.
Are we?
Please don't scare me like that. We have no problems.
Maybe it's my router.
Yeah, no, we're streaming. You scared the hell out of me.
Well, it says something went wrong on my phone.
It's probably the cell router, which is unreliable. Oh, goodness. It's like,
I'm spreading misinformation.
Yeah, you are. See, now that's very cult-like, Tracy. I mean, come on. Get with the program.
I'm so sorry. I shall go beat myself.
So here you go. So look, we have a healthy stream since I pushed the streaming button, which is like we've never had this. So this is fantastic. I think that was the problem. I think that was plugged into the gateway was plugged into the surge protector. Okay, so we got about an hour here. I'm going to keep going because there's too much data here, and I want to take a break and lose my train of thought. So, number 2, minimize.
They're calling me a sleeper agent.
Oh yes, I see. Very deceptive. See, that's already in the first one right now. All right, so number 2, minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including A, internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media. B, critical information. C, former members. D, keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate. That's a good idea. And control through cell phone and texting calls, internet tracking. Okay, so again, if you're looking at this in context to undue influence, all of these make sense. I don't think, I don't see really any conventional churches or even political organizations doing those things. So I think those are correct. I don't see any problem with those as being indicative of a cult. Number 3, compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Oh, look out. I think the entire Republican and Democratic parties just fell under the category of a cult, and undue influence on top of it, because aren't they supposed to be representing us? I mean, we're supposed to have the influence over them, and they're controlling the way we think. That is undue influence, and it is compartmentalization of information, and it's all us versus them today, isn't it? Isn't it? All right. Even the whole identity of LGBTQI. Why isn't H in there for heterosexual? Why isn't S in there for straight? Okay. You know why? Because it's us versus them. That's exactly what they wanted to exclude certain groups, because we're the enemy. Okay. And they want their members to think that way, which is what radicalizes them into becoming school shooters or something else. Fortunately, it doesn't usually go that route. I don't think, it's typical for trans people to go shoot up schools, but the attacks on Christians is getting greater because they're being indoctrinated, That's why I brought it up, because I want to keep referencing back. And look, we all know what, Heaven's Gate was. We all know what the Branch Davidians were. Okay. We know about the Moonies, but what we don't really necessarily think of is that these political institutions are doing these very things to us, and we're okay with those, though. We're okay with those because they're not giving you the physical Kool-Aid. They're just making you drink the fake stuff. Okay.
Number 3, more in depth.
Oh, did I finish? No, I didn't. I didn't finish number 3.
You just started the first one.
Okay. Ensure that information is not freely accessible. Control information at different levels and missions within the group. Yeah, that is very cult-like, but it's not uncommon for any organization, even a corporation, to have different levels of need to know. I mean, the government works on that level. Mm-hmm. I mean, so, that's not unusual behavior, and that's not undue influence either. So I'm going to throw that one out. Allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. Well, what do you mean by leadership? Are you talking about one person, or are you talking about the board of directors? Because
parents.
It's like that depends upon how it's being utilized. It could be cult-like, and it might not be. You can't generalize a statement like that. You have to qualify it. He doesn't qualify it here. Okay, number 4. Encourage spying on other members. Yeah, that's never acceptable. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. Impose a buddy system to monitor and control a member. Not acceptable. I think the Christian scientists do that, right? The Scientology. What? What's so funny?
You want to share the story about Netflix?
About Netflix? I don't know what you're talking about.
We had someone in a church that we went to see become friends on Netflix.
So thank you. Yes, when I joined, I'm not going to mention which one it is.
No.
Okay,
no.
I don't want to call them out.
No.
But when we were coming back to the church, we went to a parish, and they got very friendly with us, and they acted like they were very friendly. And then they said, hey, you guys have Netflix? I'm like, yeah. He's like, hey, we can, if you sign me on as a friend, we can share movie ideas. So if I see a movie that I really like, I can suggest it to you. So why don't we hook up? It's like, okay. And so I didn't do it. And so every time I went back to church, he would keep saying, have you done it yet? I haven't gotten the but it's like, okay, I'll do it. So I went home and I finally did it. And then I didn't realize, but what it also does is it shows the other person all of your viewing activity. Now, I didn't really give a damn because you know who uses Netflix in this house? My son Levi. He was like a toddler at this point, and if even born, and so all of the shows were like Pingu and Thomas the Tank Engine and stuff like that. So they, but I know, I mean, it became very obvious to me because there were other things that happened, and this is just a conventional Catholic church, okay. There were other things that happened that were very clear that this was just a psyop on me.
I can't remember what it was, but he did ask a question about a movie we had watched. Yeah. And it was very hypercritical.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what were we doing watching that? I don't remember what it was. I mean, we don't watch porn or anything like that, so I don't know what they could have been.
I mean, it might have even been Doubt. It was around the time that
maybe it was Doubt. I think it was Doubt. I think it was Doubt. And so it's like, when I started to see that it was giving them insight, I cut it off. But that's part of this. That is cult. Like, does that mean the Catholic Church is a cult? No.
Report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. Like, why would you spy on someone unless you were doing that?
And they did do that because the pastor did find out about some of this stuff. Yep. Ensure that individual behavior is monitored by the group. And of course, yes, they're very elitist. Most churches are very elitist, and they do this.
Well, again, this also comes back around to cancel culture.
It does come to cancel culture.
This person said something 10 years ago on Twitter when they were a kid.
Yeah. Dig it out from 10 years ago.
Let's fire them from their job.
Some comedian wore blackface on Saturday Night Live, and we have to cancel them over this. Stuff like that. These are the kinds of things that is cult behavior. Okay, it is. I'm sorry, it is. Which is, like I said, I promised you at the beginning of this show that by the time we're done, all of us are going to be in a cult. Okay, all of us are in one.
Well, it's like going back to the digging up history. It's one thing for someone to do something that is negative by today's standards, but to look at something that they did in history with today's standards, you can't do that. You cannot look at history with today's eyes.
Right.
Even if it's 10 years ago, you can't look at 10 years ago with today. No. Like talking about LGBTQIA.
Don't forget the plus.
Plus. I got into a thing with a coworker many, many, many years ago because I used the term lifestyle choice. Because when I was growing up, that was what you used. That was the terminology that was used. And I was unaware that had changed.
Yeah, it was impolite
and
to not use that.
It caused a lot of strife for me at work. I know now why that's not the appropriate term to use. But you can't villainize someone for using a term that was once okay. You can't do that because it's like the time hasn't changed.
But if you belong to a political cult that tells you that you need to start villainizing people, that's why people are doing it now. See, that's the cult. That's where it goes from cult-like to actual cult behavior. So it's like everybody adopts certain cult-like things. This is all human behavior here. Nothing here is that unusual. Right. But it becomes a cult when it becomes the MO of the organization itself. And yes, that is a perfect example. Very well stated. Okay. Number 5, extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube movies, and other media. Okay, well, tell me one special interest group that doesn't do that. Show me one church that doesn't do that. Is it undue influence? Well, in church, as long as it's staying within the walls and people are free to be there and free to leave, then I would say that's not undue influence. However, when you belong to a political cult and your little particular side wants to push your ideologies on the rest of us, that is undue influence. I didn't ask for that. I don't agree with it, and I don't want it in my life. So keep it at home and stay out of my arena of awareness. Otherwise, guess what? Cult behavior, folks. Cult behavior. Okay? I don't force people to become Christian. I don't engage in oppressive missionary activity. I simply make the gospel available, and it's whoever wants it can have it. Whoever doesn't want it can leave it. I don't control anybody. All right. But, I'm transphobic, apparently, for saying that my psychological training is such that transgenderism is a mental illness. That's transphobia, apparently. First of all, they're not even using the term right, because I'm sorry, I don't care how people want to change the semantics. Phobia means fear. I don't fear anything. I don't fear anybody. Okay? I was in the south side of Chicago once, many, many years ago, walking around at 2 a.m. because of an incident that I would need a lot more time to talk about if we wanted to talk why I was out there in the south side of Chicago at that time. But I was trying to find a cab, which was hard to do in that part of Chicago. And a guy held a gun right to my face and said he was going to blow my head off if I didn't do something or go with him. He wanted me to go with him. I basically looked at him. I said, well, fuck you. You have to shoot me. And I kept walking. He didn't shoot me. Clearly, I'm still here. Oh, maybe in another universe I did get shot. I don't know. But in this universe, he didn't shoot me. I didn't feel even an ounce of fear. Nothing at all. Because people just don't scare me. And death doesn't scare me. And I'm sorry, your ideologies don't scare me either. You're not going to control how I think. Neither should you let anybody scare you or control how you think. Okay? That's what proves I'm not a cult leader, because cult leaders don't tell you things like that. Okay, let's go on. Number 5B, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. Oh my God. I mean, that just sounds like the Democrats and Republicans on every single level. And churches do this too. Okay. And I actually agree. I agree with these. These are cult activities.
Are we talking about 5A and B?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can we say Disney?
Oh, yeah. I haven't been to Disney in years. I don't think I'll ever go back. I mean, it's basically like it's a concentration camp.
Every time you turn around, they're saying something new that's different. It's a complete flip flop.
Yeah.
Because they found out, oh, that's not what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah. Number 6, unethical use of confession. Oh, this is a big one. Okay, we're going to talk about this a little bit here. Unethical use of confession. Information about sins used to disrupt and or dissolve identity boundaries. Well, that should never be happening. Withholding forgiveness or absolution. All right, let me explain why this is a problem. Okay. If a person were to come to me, and this has happened. Okay. I'm not obviously going to reveal anything other than the general details. But if a person comes to me, and this did happen, and confesses that they sexually molested a child, I, as a bishop, am obligated to withhold absolution until they turn themselves in. So my condition is, I will grant you absolution after you turn yourself into the police. Because I can't reveal it. I can't go to the police. That would violate the seal of confession. But you're sure as hell not going to get my absolution if you're not turning yourself in.
Well, how can you give the absolution? The whole point of confession is to confess the sin and never do it again.
Exactly.
And have penance for the sin.
Exactly.
The only penance for a crime would be serving time.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be my penance. It'd be like, you need to turn yourself in and go to jail. No absolution for that. Is that cult-like? No, of course not. Is that undue influence? Well, no, because I'm not forcing them to come to confession. But again, with this loosey-goosey kind of narrative that's the Bite model has here, it's both really good and really bad. I'm going to simplify it for you in a minute. Last one here is manipulation of memory, possible false memories. That is kind of manipulative, and that nobody should be doing that.
Also very political.
Very much.
We
so.
never said that.
Yeah.
No, we never said
Very
that.
political. Oh God, yeah, you're right. Politicians are doing that all the time.
All the time.
All right, let's look at thought control. Number 3. We're plugging away here. We've got. Let's see. Let me look at the time here. We've got
40 minutes.
Yeah, but we only really have about 30. 34 minutes. 36 minutes. 36 minutes. Okay. As a commercial and everything else. All right, let's look at this one. Number 1, require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Well, what the hell are you involved in a religion then if you can't internalize the doctrine of the group as truth? I mean, is the gospel not truth? Is that the implication here? Yeah, if you want to be a Christian, you're required to do this. I mean, unless the undue influence is being forced to be a part of this and not being allowed to leave. If you're being forced to be a part of a group and they're not letting you leave and they're saying that you must internalize these doctrines, these are the only truths that you are allowed to, that is a cult.
Well, looking farther down, it says instill black and white thinking.
Oh, I wonder who that qualifies
Well,
for.
I mean, it's also by internalizing the group's doctrine or truth, that's instilling black or white thinking because it's all or nothing. In preparation for tonight, I looked up a couple of questions that I had heard once and I wanted to revisit them. And one of the questions is really problematic because it's religion. And it's how to tell if you're in a cult or if you're involved in a cult. And the question is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but the question is basically, are you able to have real doubt about your beliefs or are you absolutely certain? And, I think that, there's a certain faith conviction that comes and where you can be, certain in your faith. But, anyone on a spiritual path will have moments of doubt. And I think that's what it's referring to, is that true faith would be where you're not, because it's hard to be steadfast 100%. I'm confident in my belief in God, but I have doubts about maybe what a teaching that I've heard, or a particular gospel reading or something like that, so I think that that's where the doubt comes in. But again, this black and white thinking, instilling black and white thinking, the very question of, are you able to have doubt or not? If you don't have doubt, if you're certain in your faith, then you must be in a cult.
At the beginning of the show from last week's, the recording part of tonight.
How ridiculous is that?
Well, it is ridiculous, but the recording part I said about abortion. We as Christians have to err on the side of life. We don't have the luxury of having an opinion on abortion.
Right.
All right. So even if you have a personal opinion, as a Christian, you don't have that luxury. Is that black and white thinking? Is that internalizing doctrine as truth? Is that cult-like? That's the Christian faith. I mean, there's a difference here. And I think and this is very important. I want everyone to stop what you're doing for a minute and listen to what I'm about to say. Where this is going that it fails to seem to recognize, and maybe there's other material here that I'm missing. I don't know. I'm going to give
Well, it would help if he would come
doubt.
on the show to talk about
Well, that's why I wanted him on the show and not have to do this myself, because I don't know this material like he does. And I don't know his intent behind it. And that's why I would like to ask these questions. But he seems to be having a problem, or at least the bite model seems to have a problem differentiating the difference between a cult and a sect.
Yes.
Because a cult is a deviation from something. It's a deviancy. A sect is also a deviation from something. But there is a vast difference between a sect that broke off, like Protestants are a sect of Christianity. They're not a cult. But when it becomes so deviant that they start adopting things that are against the original spirit of what it was, then you have to start looking at all these cult behaviors, undue influence, and how it relates to these different points. So you can't just take these as face value. You have to qualify them in each individual circumstance. Otherwise, they have no meaning. And I think I think a lot of them are superfluous. He could have reduced this down to some very simple points, which I'm going to do here. Okay, let's
definitely very flowy.
Very, very much so. Organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. Okay, welcome to American politics. Welcome to, again, the Trump supporters, LGBTQIA.
Life
Life itself. Okay? I'm against us versus them thinking, by the way. The Holy Spirit taught us the unity of all people and to love all people. But I guess that's like we're the bad guys because we're Christians, right? Teaching love and respect in genuine, not political affiliation, love and respect, not superficial, which is what people seem to want instead. Okay, change person's name and identity. Okay, that's really weird. But, again, I took Nicholas III's my patriarchal name. I mean, that's tradition. Use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. Okay, so like when I guess liberals call people Trump-tards, or no, wait, no, they call them Trump-tards, right?
I don't know.
I don't know what it is.
That sounds plausible.
T-Trump and then you got libtards, right?
Yeah. Turf.
Turf. These are cult words. Okay, that is cult behavior. So don't use those kinds of words. How about you talk to people with respect? How about you act professionally and intelligently instead? How hard is that? But no, you're going to use stupid ass words? I'm sorry. That's ridiculous.
I've even seen where straight is used derogatorily. Like all you straights out there.
Or trads. How about trads?
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. Encourage only good and proper thoughts. Well,
checks out.
Okay, Hecklefish. Encourage only good and proper thoughts. I mean, wait a second here. I guess he puts it in like quotes. So I guess he's talking about but I mean, that's so general. We got to throw that one out. Hypnotic techniques are used to alter mental states, undermine critical thinking, and even to age regress the member. I mean, I don't know what kind of techniques he's talking about, but I've never known a church that uses hypnotic techniques. So I can't speak on this. I can imagine that some of the radical ones out there might do this, but we don't do this. So I don't know anything about that one. So that's on the fence. 6, memories are manipulated and false memories are created. Well, that's gaslighting. Which
no, it's not.
So yeah, if your church is doing that, I'd be a little bit worried. Number 7, teaching thought stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, chanting, meditating, praying, speaking in tongues.
That's exactly what they're meant to do.
I mean, why don't you just be like, Dr. Hassan needs to just basically like... I
hate religion.
I mean, does that not how this reads? No wonder he didn't come on the show.
Jeez.
I mean, look, if you're listening to this, I know I gave the link, although this is not the same link you got because the other show failed. But if you are listening to this... You are still welcome to come on the show, and I'm not going to be mean to you or anything, but I mean, I really think you need to explain this, okay? This needs to be explained because singing and humming? I mean, what the hell are you talking about here? That one goes. Sorry, that one goes. And stopping thought stopping techniques. I mean, what's wrong with stopping negative thinking? All right. I mean, psychology teaches this, for goodness sake. Okay. Number 8, rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism.
I mean, I would say that is cultish.
That is cultish, but I mean, again, it's not like everyone's not doing that. Mm-hmm. Number 9, forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed. Yeah, that's cult. You can put that one.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, again, a lot of these political organizations have doctrines and policies that you're not allowed to question. Look at Twitter canceling my account. They told me they still won't explain what it was I did, other than saying that I incite violence. And I have been, even under Elon Musk, permanently banned from the net from the platform. And the policy is divine law. And then, these liberal-minded people say, oh, it's a private company. It's a private company. They are allowed to do anything they want. Well, just under Elon Musk. It was a public traded company before that. Suppose I own stock in it. What then? What then? What? I still should be banned for some kind of policy that's allowed and not allowed, and it's completely arbitrary? That's cult-like. So, sorry, Twitter, and sorry, Elon, but you run a cult. 11, instill new map of reality. Again, it's in quotes. What does it mean? It could be cult-like. It might not be, depending upon what you mean by that. I don't know what that means, so I'm going to throw it out. All right, let's look at the last one here, and then we'll start taking your questions. We'll try to go quickly through this. Emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. Well, guess what? They are. If you're a self-centered bastard, what? We're not supposed to call you out for that? I mean...
Oh, boy.
Give me a break. Okay, I'm throwing that one out too. Teach emotion stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, and doubt.
Okay, back to one. I could see where, cults will say things like, I don't know. I could see where it would be like, where it wouldn't necessarily be like negative feelings, that we would deem negative. There are cults that would deem positive feelings as evil. Like if you love too much or something, I could see where cults would fall into that. I wouldn't necessarily throw that out.
See,
but he's not being very clear.
That's why
either.
you need to be very careful with your language here and not use these general terms that apply to just about anyone and everything.
Right.
Number 3, make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Yeah, I agree with that one. But again, that's very typical of politics. It's always the other guy's fault. I mean, if you're a liberal, it's always the conservatives that cause your grief. And if you're a conservative, it's always the liberals. They're out to destroy the country. Okay? So again, I see more cult-like behavior in politics than I do in religion right now. But I'm sure when Dr. Hassan put this together, it was an attack on religion. It wasn't on politics.
The language is very much religion.
It's very much religion, but it's not. I mean, it's not. All right, number 3.
The bigger problem.
Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leaders of the group. Okay, number 4. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as identity guilt. You are not living up to your potential.
Wow.
I mean,
family is deficient.
Original sin is I guess a cult like now. Your family is deficient.
That's a big one right now on TikTok.
Family is deficient.
That's a big controversy.
Past is suspect. Your affiliations are unwise. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. Social guilt, historical guilt.
Ooh, historical guilt. That's a good one.
So what are we talking about? Like reparations now?
Colonizer.
Christ, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry. I mean, the more I read this, like this is the first time I'm actually breaking it down in any detail. And I mean, no, we got to throw number 4 out. That's ridiculous. I mean, there's stuff there that is valid, but it's not clear enough. And that's way more than is necessary to identify a cult. Number 5, instill fear, such as fear of thinking independently, the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. Instill fear about losing one's salvation. Okay, well, if you're making it a scrupulous thing, I could see that. But I mean, are we not supposed to be concerned about that as Christians? I mean, I guess if you're an atheist scientist or a, PhD, living in the ivory tower of academia, then you have the luxury of talking about salvation this way. But that's not the real world. Leaving or being shunned by the group, others' disapproval. Okay, all right, let's go. 6, extremes of emotional highs and lows, love bombing and praise one moment and then declaring you're a horrible sinner. Okay.
I mean, I see that all the time.
Yeah, I don't think that's cult, though. I think that's human.
That's human behavior.
7, ritualistic and sometimes public confession of sins. Well, guess what? The Christian church used to only confess in public, and back in 2,000 years ago. So maybe some groups that he's talking about have just decided to readopt an old technique. I mean, it would definitely be very humbling to do that.
Well, also in the non-religious part, when someone gets canceled, they have to confess and apologize.
And what about ritualistic?
I did this thing.
I remember that.
It's
yeah.
negative.
What about ritualistic? I mean, isn't the sacrament of confession a ritual? Mm-hmm. Sacrament of reconciliation? Phobia, indoctrination. Where are we? Inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority.
Incubating.
Inculcating, it says.
I think it's supposed to be incubating.
Okay.
Look
Inculcating.
that up,
It sounds like a familiar word, but I couldn't tell you what it. I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly.
I'm looking.
It sounds like a word.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Instill an attitude, idea, or habit by persistent instruction.
Thank you.
I stand corrected.
No happiness or fulfillment possible outside of the group. Terrible consequences if you leave. Hell, demon possession, incurable diseases, accident, suicide, insane 10,000 reincarnations, etc.
He's definitely targeting religion.
Oh, God, yeah. Shunning of those who leave, fear of being rejected by friends and family. I mean, this guy, I think he might need a therapist by the time I'm done reading this. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
Let's just finish this real quick.
Yeah.
Never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, or seduced by money, sex, and rock and roll. Threats of harm to ex-member and family. Back to that again. Okay, I'm kind of done here. Putting this back over me. All right. All right. So let's simplify this, okay? I'm going to simplify it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is all he had to say. Okay, we didn't need all those things.
He has notes.
I do, because I didn't want to forget anything. I can barely read it because of stupid color paper. But
I'm sorry, you can barely read it. What?
I can, because of the stupid paper. Okay, no, it's not my handwriting. It's the color of the paper, and it's kind of dark in here. Anyway, there's a difference between a sect and a cult, okay? And sects are normal deviations that continue on in a different tradition, a original core set of beliefs, whereas cults are usually radicalized, okay? And there's a difference between having normal opinions and, you know, doing your own thing and leaving your people alone and wanting people to leave you alone. That's fine. But forcing people to think like you do, canceling them when they don't, calling them names like transphobic if they don't agree with your particular position on the subject matter, now you're invading that person's freedom. And that is cult-like behavior, and that's radicalization, okay? It happens in politics, happens in religion, and it happens in society. And we saw it happen last week with the shooting that I started this conversation out about. So the first question I'm going to say, if you're wondering if you're in a cult, the first one is it a sect or is it a cult? Is it a radicalized deviation, or is it just an extension of the doctrine that it purports to be? Okay? If it has an ancient history that has a lineage that goes back to something viable that billions of people, trillions in fact, have believed over 2 centuries, it's probably not a cult. So calling the Roman Catholic Church, I know a lot of people like to say it's a cult. It's not a cult. People use that word very loosely, which it really means is if you belong to a religion I don't like, well, then you belong to a cult. That's not how it works. Okay, so the first question you need to ask yourself is that. Second question is it harmful? And by harmful, see, I qualify my statements. Does it lead one to criminal behavior? Does it lead one to some kind of social deviancy? Okay, so like David Koresh, collecting 13-year-olds to have sex with. That's a social deviancy. It's also criminal. Okay? Stockpiling guns because the Armageddon's around the corner and, you know, you're going to shoot anybody that comes on the property. That's kind of radical. All right? Not healthy. Criminal behavior.
Lizard people.
Lizard people. We have a show we love called The Y-Files. Check it out.
Amazing.
It is amazing. I would love for him to come on this show, but I think he's got millions of followers.
He's a big fish.
We've got like 2,000 subscribers. He's got 2 million or something. Okay, next one. Are its creeds directly connected to the established source? So we already kind of, that's kind of how you decide whether or not it's a sect or a cult. You know, because if it goes back to the established source of, like in Christianity, for example, as long as its creeds go back, like what's the creed of the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church? The Nicene Creed. So that's been in existence since 325 AD. Okay, calling us a cult when that's our creed is highly ignorant. So, but I mean, if we changed it to be like, but you know, the leader of the church can collect 13-year-olds to have sex with. Well, yeah, now you're radicalized. Okay, that's what David Koresh kind of did. All right. Does it endorse various forms of extremism or radicalization? Okay, so kind of, again, this is kind of flowing into the same thing. But you have to ask yourself these things. Look for again, it's how you decide the difference between a cult and a sect. Radicalization, extremism. Okay? It's okay to be different, but it's not okay to force your beliefs on someone else and expect them to comply and to hurt them if they don't follow it. Does it feel good? Okay, now that might be like, well, now you're sounding vague. Understand me. If we're talking about Joel Osteen, where he intentionally distorts the Christian faith so as to make it feel so good that you feel really good about giving all your money away to him, that's cult-like behavior. Yes, I just said it. That is a cult. That is not a Christian denomination. I'm sorry, it's not. It's not a sect. It's cult-like. And it falls into some of the Bite models warnings about manipulation of money and everything else. And lastly, does it deify a person or an ideology? Does it deify a person or an ideology? When people call the cult of Trump, as Dr. Hassan does, I agree with him. Trump has been deified in the minds of those who support him. I mean, you can like his politics and think that he's maybe would do a good job for the country. That's one thing. But, going to raid the U.S. Capitol on his behalf, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. That's very cult-like. Okay. But also ideology, LGBTQIA+. I mean, is this like some kind of divine law that nobody can criticize it without, serious social ramifications? Can we not sit down and talk about how harmful it might even be to the people themselves that it's supposedly there to protect? Just like Black Lives Matter, same thing. Is that really protecting black people? I don't think so. We need to do more inside ourselves. And cults only want you to do things for them. Okay? So if anybody were to ever say, is the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church a cult? Is Bishop Bryan a cult leader? You got to ask yourself those questions. So am I, and I would actually add one last thing. Does the practices and tenets of the organization lead to greater understandings of individual freedom and authenticity? Or does it reduce a person's awareness of themselves, turning them into automatons or habitual robots? Have I done that for you? Okay. Have I helped you to find the freedom to be who you are? And have you found support in me to say, I'm standing behind you in that decision? Or have I taken that away from you? Has this church taken that away from you? So when people call this church a cult, it's like, it's basically going back to that other definition. It's whatever religion you don't like. Okay. That's where the whole thing collapses. And I cannot in any way emphasize how important it is to just simplify this. Okay. The bite model has some good points. It has a lot of nonsense in there as far as I'm concerned. I think it definitely applies more to politics than religion, even though it was clearly written for religion. And, it was kind of nasty. Anyway, I mean, I guess we can, does anyone want to call into the show? Does anyone have a question? I mean, I guess I can put up, we don't have much time left here, but I can put it up there. If you want to call in, 718-362-6380. That's pin number 855-4111 to get into the queue. So you dial 718-362-6380 and enter pin number 855-4111. You can also call internationally free on Skype, just dialing up Eye of the Seer, or you can ask a question in the chat room. Have there been any questions in the chat?
There was one. I couldn't tell if it was made in jest or not, so I'm going to just ask it.
Okay.
Jimmy asked, how many people does it take to make a cult?
Well, see, according to the bite model, I think it really just takes just one person that gets people to jump on board. But if you're talking about like how many followers does a cult person need, I don't think you need many. I mean, I think, honestly, you could have 2 or 3 people. Honestly, I don't see why you couldn't. It's just, how far does the manipulation go? With politics, it means millions of people. With religions, it varies greatly. So I think, when it becomes dangerous, and I will say this, Dr. Hassan does differentiate the difference between a benign cult and a dangerous cult in the literature. But I don't really think a true cult is ever benign. Okay. And, religion that's done with sincerity and follows the gospel message, and which is all about liberation, is not something that would ever or should ever be associated with a destructive system. What is destructive is what we're seeing today. And look at the world today and look at how unstable people are. And this is the great result of your, secularization. People want that so much, right? They want their secular life. They want to be able to do whatever the hell they want. Atheism and agnosticism is the rule of law. And what has that brought you? Are you really happier than people were 50, 60 years ago? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I don't think they're smarter either. And they're a lot stupider today than they were 50, 60 years ago. Although I think it's something in the food. I think all the preservatives and additives in the food. We were talking about that on the Nicolay Network today.
Lizard people.
Yeah, the lizard people. Any questions in the chat? Any questions about anything we've talked about here tonight? Because this has kind of been a lecture, and I mean, look, you guys asked me for more of these kinds of shows, so here you go. You get one. And I'm more than happy to cover these topics. I know a lot of you enjoy them and like them and like when I do discuss these things, but, your feedback is always important. And I hope I've made myself clear tonight about my position on these things. And I hope people aren't going to go run and, say, oh, look at that crazy bishop. I knew he was a transphobic bastard. You'd be wrong. Maybe get out of your cult for a minute and, pay attention, listen to the words, take up the English language, listen. It's not what I said. Okay. It's not what I said. I don't want people to be affiliating with these kinds of dangerous identities. Okay. Be who you are. By all means, be who you are. You will have my eternal, unconditional support forever if you be who you are. But don't don't be pulling this delusional bullshit on me and expect me to go around for the ride for you. That's dangerous to you. It's unethical for me. I can't get behind that. But you'll have my love and support, though. You just won't have my participation. And why are you're not entitled to any more than that. None of us are. You're not.
Why would you want it?
Why would you want? And why do you need it? Why do you think you need it? Why do you need my permission to be something? I mean, go run with it, but don't expect me to comply with it. It's against your own good. And I'm not just talking about transgenderism. I'm talking about everything, religion or otherwise. Even in religion, it's like if the Christian faith is causing you great distress and harm, then leave. It would be better for you to leave.
It harkens back to the black and white thinking.
It does.
It's all or nothing. And if you really feel that something is all or nothing, you need to check yourself.
Yep, you do. And that's well said. It's like we got into a discussion about this because we talked a lot about the shooter on the Nicolayan network, which is why it was fresh in my mind. And I probably would have never even gone in this direction if it hadn't happened, because it just made me think about the radicalization of
it's all
our
anyone's
youth.
talking about right now.
It is. Now they're talking about Trump being indicted, but
not in my circle of the internet.
I'm surprised because I think the liberals really love the fact that he's being indicted. But I mean,
they don't believe it'll actually
amount to anything.
Yeah,
maybe not.
Not my circle of the internet.
It's definitely not my circle either. I don't care what happens. He's not. I'm no friend to Donald Trump, and he's certainly been no friend to me. So, as far as I'm concerned, whatever happens, happens. But we were talking on the Nicolayan network about homosexuality, because when we do, this church has a lot. No, I mean, not a lot, but I think for a church of his size, it has a large number of supporters who would find themselves in that LGBTQIA plus spectrum. I don't think it has any trans benefactors, but it definitely has gay benefactors. Okay, and we were talking about this today with one of our gay benefactors, and she understands what I was saying. And if I seem like, because I was very upset about this shooting, because I see it as an attack on Christians. And I think those 6 people were absolutely, those 3 adults and 3 children were absolute martyrs. They were killed for their faith, which is martyrdom. We were talking about their, my strong words, and she always asks and clarifies. She doesn't like just jump the gun and say, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were. You hate gay people," or something. She knows better. Okay. Still supports the church. Still willing to enter into dialogue, and does a fantastic job of doing so. I'm not going to call her out by name, but she knows who she is if she's listening. And I told her, I said, you will always have my love and support entirely. And I will always be here for you to live authentically. But there's just certain limits that the church as an institution can do. It doesn't make it a cult. One of those limits is sacramental theology is fixed. It's not changeable. Okay. And the sacramental theology of the church is such that the sacramental union of a man and woman is the only way it can happen. Okay. It's not an attack on gay people. It's simply the fact that I don't even have the power. The Pope himself does not have the power to change it. It's a closed book. It is what it is. And what makes it bad, what makes it terrible, is when gay people feel ostracized from the church because of these kinds of doctrines. And the reason that happens is the church isn't explaining the situation well.
No.
And also, it's because these the gay community is making homosexuality a identity. It's not an identity. Okay? It's not an identity. And it shouldn't be seen as such. It shouldn't be seen as such. And that's what makes it dangerous. Dangerous to hold those kinds of convictions, because we have to separate ourselves from the dynamic of what we do and what we choose to do with our life and who we are. I am not my heterosexuality. A gay person is not their homosexuality. This is just one aspect, hopefully the only very simple aspect of their life, not their identity. This is why, again, I'm very hard on the trans thing, because it's all about identity. It has no foundation outside of identity. And I don't think we should be identifying with such things. Identification in that way is what causes the us versus them. Identification in such ways is what causes people to feel ostracized and no longer part of the church. And then we as Christians don't do anything to help that matter. We don't do anything to rectify it. We keep it forever an issue because it's always us versus them. When, I'm sorry, you're going to be hard pressed to find one Christian who hasn't fornicated, masturbated, or had impure thoughts.
Lusted in their hearts.
Yeah. And guess what?
Shame.
It's the same damn thing. Okay? It's the same damn thing. So don't be telling me that the gay people are so horrible and they're worse sinners than you are. No, we're all sexually deviant. No one is worse than another.
I've known some Christians who were the most hateful people, and I've known some gay people who were the most loving. Mm-hmm. It's not about the sin. And
I'll take a loving gay person in my church over a hateful Christian any day. Any day. All right? Anyway, there you go. Now you know what a cult is. Now you know how to figure out if you're in one, and hopefully you Nicolaitan Catholics out there we got a clean bill of health. Dr. Hassan would probably disagree. I don't know. Come on the show and tell us.
That's black or white thinking.
Yeah, I know. Tell me I'm wrong. Okay, so we got Holy Week next week, so there's no show, and we take a break off for Easter, so there's no show. So our next show will be on April 18th. Okay, that's April 18th. Escaping Hell with brand new guest David Gorelli. All right, you don't want to miss that one. But that's our next show. Until then, I hope that you will follow us on Holy Week. Come join us at our masses. Participate with us. Everyone is welcome. But if you don't, that's okay. I'll see you out there in the ether. Take care. God bless everyone.